It's very interesting. But this restaurant chain that she owns, yes, is owned by female members of her family. Her mother, her sisters, and now their daughters are involved in this restaurant. So she says we have a woman-owned business, is what Hannah On says. So I'm quoting Hannah On today to say we have a female-owned committee today. So we have a woman-owned committee here today because all of our guys are not done. So we'll get a lot done, won't we?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, Cal, I knew you'd have to say something.
I appreciate you letting me sit at the table.
Well, this woman-owned committee will do its work, and Cal will try to keep us in line, but that is going to be a really hard thing to accomplish, Cal. Yeah. And do you notice he was silent with that one? It's like, man, is that an understatement? And he's blushing a little bit. I've embarrassed him already this morning. So we are really pleased that y'all are here, and our committee is ready to go to work. Terry and David are both in another meeting, and they will be in shortly, so we will see more people merging with our group up here. And I'm sure most of y'all know them. So I will dispense with introductions when they arrive. The first item on our agenda is my committee report, and in the interest of time, so that we can give as much time as possible to our last agenda item for planning, I will dispense with that. And since I've wasted time telling stories about restaurant owning friends of mine, we probably need to hurry on, don't we? The next item is Agenda 3, consideration of a recommendation to the board on a request from the Texas A&M University System Health Science Center for approval of the Doctor of Pharmacy degree with a major in pharmacy. And as all of you will remember, at a long-awaited item on the agenda in the April meeting, the board approved the administrative transfer of the Irma Rangel College of Pharmacy, located on the Texas A&M University Kingsville campus, to the Texas A&M University System Health Science Center. The board also approved a request by the A&M Health Science Center for preliminary authority to offer a Doctor of Pharmacy degree. This was a process that has taken a number of years to have happened. To build the school, it was left unfunded and empty for a while, and this is a really good resolution to that issue. So we have long awaited this, as have many of you in the audience that are here from A&M as well. We are here to consider a recommendation to the board on a request from the A&M Health Science Center for approval of the Doctor of Pharmacy degree. Dr. Alicia Dorsey, Vice President for Communication and Program Development for Texas A&M University System Health Science Center, and Dr. Indra Reddy, Dean of the Rangel College of Pharmacy, are here and will be available later to answer questions. Would y'all please identify yourselves? We're so glad you're both here today. And Cal will give us a summary of the request, and then we can ask him some questions, and one or both of you feel free to come forward and tell us what you think we need to know, and we can all woo-hoo and celebrate because this is finally happening. Cal.
Thank you. Chris Fowler and I last week accompanied 3 consultants to review the proposed program in Kingsville. The consultants identified several strengths of the program, including the building and the facilities. I don't know if any of you have seen it. It is a beautiful, beautiful building with state-of-the-art equipment. And the consultants were not only impressed, but they were envious as well.
Isn't that a nice position to be in?
Yes. The consultants also lauded the administrative leadership of the Health Science Center. They were also impressed with the curriculum developed by Dean Reddy and his team. As all consultants do, they had several suggestions for enhancing the program, but ultimately they felt like the program could and should open in August. They had 2 contingencies or conditions that they felt were important. One was that the institution be able to assign every single course that's going to be offered in the fall and spring to a particular instructor. That's well on its way, but not complete. And they feel like that should be done before the final vote in July. The second condition was that the institution have a plan, a specific plan, implementation plan for the site visit structure. Again, the institution is well on its way to securing all those sites, but they want a specific plan again, but before the July board meeting.
The clinical sites.
Clinical sites,
Oh,
yes.
okay.
I'm sorry. Those were the two conditions. It's also, and you should know, I'm sure you know that these tasks that aren't quite complete is largely a function of the fact that they have had 3 months, really, with the green light. 3 months ago was the green light, and so they have done put in remarkable efforts in getting all these things done, but there are, frankly, some remaining tasks. You should also know that the accrediting agency had a site visit in late April, and the preliminary report was positive, and the institution expects a recommendation of pre-candidate status when the agency votes in next week, actually. So
we will have that information before our board meeting.
we will have that information. That is correct. So the Ron Hill College of Pharmacy has pre-admitted 71 students. They are very pleased with the makeup of the students, the quality of the students. Over 60% are from South Texas. Nearly 40% are Hispanic, and they feel like they're very pleased. So our recommendation to this committee is for you to recommend to the full committee approval with the understanding that the teaching assignments and the clinical site, the clinical placement plan be in effect, and of course that the accrediting agency has given this status. But with those caveats, we recommend approval.
And we fully anticipate that all those.
We fully anticipate that those will, certainly. We
Just wanted all the details.
Yes, they wanted those details. They felt those were important.
Well, it's just amazing to have gotten this far in such a short period of time, such a long period of time, to get to the short period of time to get this accomplished. And I recognize Dr. Dorsey and Dr. Reddy a moment ago. Would either or both of you like to speak to the committee?
Just one.
Absolutely. We love to talk about great events like this happening at long last.
And I will thank you very much for giving us a minute, and thank you very much for giving us your support. We have had a very successful series of site visits. As Cal mentioned, we will be going to the ACPE, which is the accrediting board. We're going to their meeting next week when we anticipate their approval. And as we discussed in April, the balance is the accrediting agency needs to know that the state has approved everything, and the state has to know that the accrediting agency has approved everything. So it's a delightful little dance that we are playing. A number of things have happened since both of our site visits, as Cal also alluded to, many of the recommendations, even the recommendations since the site team from the coordinating board was there. We've had 2 additional faculty members that have been interviewed. In fact, one of the interviews was taking place during the site visit. 2 of our department heads, their first day in as department heads was the day of the site visit. So it was a very interesting week. But again, we want to thank you for your support. And if you need any feedback or additional information from Dr. Reddy, he can certainly answer any questions you have about the specifics.
Does anybody have any questions?
So these 2 conditions have to be met before we vote in July, is that correct?
According to the
That would be up to you. That would be up to you. But
Okay.
it's the staff recommendation is that for a positive vote, for a staff recommendation of approval in July, that those conditions be met. We don't anticipate any problems with those.
You agree?
Yes,
You won't have any problem?
we will not have any problem. We do now know who is going to teach every class. We have tentative syllabi in place for every class, and with respect to the clinical visits, we now have a director of our clinical pharmacy practice experience who has been named and in place, and he is working on the affiliation agreements as we speak, which was also one of the recommendations.
Great.
Any questions? Great, thank you so much. Dr. Dorsey, we appreciate it. Dr. Reddy, did you want to say anything, or?
No, but just thank you again. I take this opportunity to thank you, all of you. And just as Dr. Dorsey mentioned, already preparing to submit the report to the ACTE as part of this, so we knew that we had to do those, and we're pretty confident that we'll be able to produce that before your board meeting.
Well, it's just amazing what y'all have been able to accomplish. So, just that commitment that you would not be overcome, right? That you would get this accomplished and get it up so we could actually get students in for the fall semester. It's awesome. Thank you very much.
There is one other thing. As an instructor, I'm all about the pop quizzes. Last time when we were here in April, I made sure that everybody knew the date, and the date that we're opening class is
September.
August.
It's a Monday.
It's a Monday. August the 14th will absolutely be our first day of class.
I better write that down because, our pass rate on that pop quiz was really bad. Unless you give partial credit for a month and a day.
Those of you that at least knew the month, that's a good thing. And I have invitations for our parties for you after you vote.
I think we see how she makes things happen, don't you? Yeah, she motivates you.
She's waiting
She's
for
that
a
carrot in the stick
motion.
thing going on there. Okay, we have a motion from Nancy. Do we have a second? We have a second from Elaine to approve the staff recommendation to move forward with this, awaiting approval of some of those last little niggly details. So we have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you very much.
She's bribing us.
I could. I've been asked to make sure that everybody knows there are no drugs in here, there is no money in
Is
here.
there candy?
Okay.
But we would like to give these to all the board members there.
I'm kind of disappointed.
We wanted one of the two.
Which one did you want?
I don't need drugs. I come wired.
That's everything. Cute. No candy or anything.
Cute.
Very clever.
We'll see you in August.
Thank you.
14.
Okay. August 14th.
Monday. This says August.
Monday, August 14th.
Party is the week before.
I was gonna say, this says August 10th.
Where's the park?
Okay, that's the party. Great. All right. The next item on our agenda is item 4, which is consideration of a recommendation to the board concerning a study to assess the need for a new pharmacy school, once again, pharmacy discussion, located in the Dallas-Fort Worth Metroplex area. And this study was requested by the 79th legislature, and it is due on September 1st. We always like to let everybody know the lovely assignments that we get from the legislature. And when we get to our planning phase, we'll talk a whole lot more about that issue and how that changes what our plans are for our committee work over the next year or two. And we did a study a few years ago about the need for pharmacy education in the state. So this will be a follow-up to that. So this is certainly not a new issue for this committee or for the coordinating board, but we'll look forward to some new data on that. And Chris Fowler has joined us, who will review some findings in the study, and then the staff recommendation on this item will be included in our board meeting agenda materials after the full evaluation of the study is completed, correct?
Yes, that's
So we're not going to do a recommendation or a vote on this item today. We're just going to talk about where we are, and it will be ready for our July meeting.
I think
You
there's
have the
some,
floor.
thank you. I think there's some really interesting information here. So as you had mentioned, we're presenting some preliminary findings of that study, looking at how Texas compares to other states in pharmacy education, looking at our state's trends in pharmacy education, the opportunity for students to attend pharmacy school here, and finally looking at trends in pharmacy practice. That's pretty much how the presentation is organized. First slide, please. California leads the nation in the number of pharmacy schools with 6. Texas, the last column on that slide, is second with Pennsylvania with 6 schools. Oddly enough, the population of the state doesn't necessarily affect the number of pharmacy schools. It just happens that, at least for the 10 most populous states, the 3 highest number of school states are in that grouping. Up until this fall, we had 4 pharmacy schools in the state, 2 in Houston, 1 based in Amarillo, and 1 in Austin. Of course, beginning in fall, we're going to be opening the Kingsville School. We will also be opening the University of Incarnate Word School. That's a private school in San Antonio. The dark ovals, I'm sorry this isn't a little more clear on the slide, but the dark ovals, or the red ovals on the slide, the dark ovals on your handout, represent the satellite programs of the existing programs. Texas Tech Health Science Center has a satellite program, you'll note, for third and fourth year pharmacy students in Dallas. The unfilled oval, I believe that's consistent on both the slide and on your handout, represents the Texas Tech Abilene program that you approved earlier this year. It will admit students beginning in fall 2007. Because we have satellites, the pharmacy student population is more diverse than you might think. For example, here on your handouts, you'll see that 62 students had their home base in the Dallas-Fort Worth area this last year. The last year of a pharmacy students' education is primarily focused on practicing pharmacy in a clinical setting. The location of that practice is often a good predictor of where the student might take their first job. Here's where the fourth year students completed the majority of their clinical instruction this year. So for those who are only looking at the slide, the Gulf Coast has about 203 fourth-year clerkships, as they're called. Dallas-Fort Worth has 59, San Antonio 35, Brownsville 5, El Paso 8, Lubbock 18, Amarillo 28. Now, there's a lot of interest in becoming a pharmacist. For one thing, we know that nationally, once you complete 6 years of education and the pharmacy program, you could make $96,000 in your first job. So not surprisingly, applications to the state's 4 existing programs have increased by 134% in the last 5 years. Quite a bit of demand. Enrollments and number of graduates were fairly unstable, as you'll see, in the mid to late 1990s as pharmacy education transitioned from a bachelor's degree to a doctor of pharmacy degree, the PharmD, adding 1 additional year to the curriculum. This also contributed to a shortage of pharmacists in Texas and across the country. But we've rebounded. Graduates have increased steadily since then by 61% in the last 5 years. This next slide shows the projection in the number of graduates through 2015. Now, this is consistent with the enrollment growth plans of the 2 new pharmacy schools and the start of the Abilene program. Based on those plans, graduates will increase by another 53% from 2005 to 2014. Here's the educational pipeline for the PharmD class that applied, was admitted, and enrolled in fall 2005. You can see that it's very competitive to get into pharmacy school, but once you're in, the attrition rate is fairly low, about 9%. One of the special issues that we look at in assessing the need for pharmacy education is opportunity. There's no freestanding pharmacy school in the Metroplex, so the question is, does that affect whether students from that region have less or more opportunity to go to pharmacy school? The slide compares the percentage of pharmacy students who report a permanent address in a region with the region's percentage of the state's population. Note the third column highlighted in yellow on your slide. 18% of pharmacy students come from the Metroplex. The Metroplex represents 27% of the state's population. From that comparison, you could say that the Metroplex is underrepresented in pharmacy schools. In contrast, the Gulf Coast, the tallest column on that chart, would represent an overrepresentation in pharmacy school. And there are 5 regions that are really underrepresented if we compare them against their general population in the state. This slide shows opportunity. Another consideration is class size. Before we start a new school, should we first look at expanding our existing programs? Texas schools have a smaller average class size than 8 of the other 10 most populous states, which suggests that they could expand and still remain within the norm for schools in similar populated states. Another way of looking at opportunity is comparing the number of bachelor's degrees awarded in the state with the number of available entering seats in pharmacy school. Using this analysis, Texas has less opportunity than 9 of the 10 states based on 2005 data. But if we then build in the enrollment of the 2 schools, new schools, and the Abilene program, Texas betters the opportunity average, all other factors remaining constant by 2007. So on to pharmacy practice issues. Despite not having a pharmacy school, the Metroplex has more pharmacists per population than 7 of the 10 regions of the state. The statewide average is 76 per 100,000 population. The Gulf Coast has 90 per 100,000. The High Plains area, 88 per 100,000. The Metroplex, 83 per 100,000, so they better the statewide average. The Metroplex appears not to have a problem attracting pharmacists to the region. The new out-of-state graduates, those who graduated in the last 10 years and who came to Texas to practice, almost 1/2 reside in the Metroplex. The pharmacists who graduated from Texas schools in the last 10 years and chose to stay in Texas to practice, 23% reside in the Metroplex, second only to the Gulf Coast region. Here are pharmacy practice patterns by individual school, and this kind of was, I thought, very interesting information. Here's Texas Southern University. The Metroplex is the number 2 practice area after the Gulf Coast, although they predominantly stay in the Gulf Coast region. Texas Tech University Health Science Center, the Metroplex is the number 1 practice area among its graduates. University of Houston, again, Metroplex is second to the Gulf Coast and where their graduates want to go. And finally, the University of Texas at Austin, I found this really surprising. It's the number 1 practice area again, beating out Central Texas, which you would think would be a fairly logical place for them to be. Now, licensing data show that Texas relies on pharmacists educated in other states to come here to practice. This is pretty common among most of our professions. There are some places like California which relies on this trend because they don't produce enough of their own, but they see that their state is a place that people want to come and practice their profession. And this is 2005 data, but it's pretty consistent with previous years of licensing data that we've gotten from the Board of Pharmacy. The net increase in 2005, that is new licensees, less retirees, and pharmacists leaving the state was 439 pharmacists, 416 fewer than the number needed to meet the TWC, Texas Workforce Commission, projections of new and replacement job openings in the profession. Here are the expected growth rates in pharmacist positions in selected workforce areas of the state. Those in the Metroplex are highlighted. This next slide compares expected growth rates among selected occupations. The majority of pharmacists are employed by drugstores, but hospitals are the second largest employer, and the Dallas-Fort Worth Hospital Council gave us their vacancy rates for pharmacists and comparable occupations for 3 years. There's pharmacists in the middle. It appears that, the vacancy rates for most of these professions are actually decreasing, which I guess is good news for the hospitals. And here's a final graph that shows projections of the general population, the number of pharmacists, and the number of PharmD graduates projected through 2015.
Are all these, I haven't added it up, but it's almost presuming that all of our programs keep every one of their graduates in the state. Does it show how many we're losing to out of state? I mean, your percentages, maybe they're based on only those who stayed in Texas,
Yes,
but without
yes.
raw numbers, what is that really telling us? I mean, are they staying? Are they leaving?
We can work on that a little bit for you.
I would just be curious to know, so since we're hiring in, are we losing out to California and all these other states? Because raw data kind of tells you that a little better in percentages when these all total up.
So here's some key preliminary findings. Texas ranks second in the U.S. in its number of pharmacy schools. Applications to pharmacy school have increased by 134% in the last 5 years. Graduates increased by 61% for the same period and are projected to increase by 53% through 2014 as the new pharmacy schools build capacity. Residents of the Metroplex are underrepresented in pharmacy education as compared to the region's percentage of the state's population. Texas is a net importer of pharmacists. In 2005, the net increase in total licensees did not meet the state's annual projection of pharmacist job openings. Texas schools could increase their pharmacy school class size and may remain within the norm for schools in states with similarly large populations. The Metroplex has the third largest number of pharmacists per 100,000 population in the state. Its ratio is above the state average of 76 pharmacists per 100,000 population. And finally, again, 49% of new out-of-state graduates and 23% of the new Texas graduates practice in the Metroplex. Any other questions or?
Questions? Comments?
What's next?
The
I mean, are we waiting for someone to come with a request, or, I mean, it looks valid, so is there a pending wannabe out there?
This,
Terry joined us. David joined us. Welcome.
we apologize for being caught
Can't
up
be two places at one
but
time.
That's what we learned this morning. We were directed by the legislature to conduct this study. And the study that will come to you, this is preliminary information. We wanted to be sure y'all had the opportunity to weigh in, and if there was information like Ms. Neal you just had that you would like to see in the report and in the analysis, we wanted to be sure that we could incorporate that, and if you had questions that you wanted us to address,
So this is a
that we
report
could be
that's going
sure.
back to them.
Yes, ma'am. And so we will probably have a recommendation to you. We do not know what that is at this point, but the actual legislation called for an assessment of the need. So there may be a conclusion of some sort as to whether the Metroplex needs a new pharmacy school. But at this moment,
So
no
the
one.
legislature not only requested the study be done, but a recommendation from us.
The way the writer was characterized, it said, conduct a study of the need for pharmacy education in the Dallas-Fort Worth Metroplex area.
But not
Not
a recommendation per se.
Right.
Just an analysis.
Just an analysis of the need. So, and there is not a pending request that we believe someone will be coming forward with, but rather this is kind of a perennial issue that comes up in the legislature, and they're just looking for some guidance from the board on this.
You know, one of the slides on page 6 was whether they could expand compared to other states. The other half of that question is, do we have the capacity to expand? I mean, how involved is that? Because, yeah, we have smaller classes and smaller production from our 6 pending or in-place schools. They could increase. The question is that something our schools would want to do, or is that something they're directed to? I mean, I need help on this.
Following the assessment, projecting the need for pharmacy education a couple of years ago, the board came back and said, could you check with the schools and determine whether there is capacity? And I believe the response was that there is capacity. The problem is resources, and that it's important to recognize that if you're going to expand the class size, there is going to be attendant resource issues that have to be addressed. But I think did all of them, Chris, come back and say they could increase if they had adequate resources?
I
to
think
do
in
it?
most cases, they are capital issues, particularly at UT Austin and at Texas Southern University. They have increased, I think, to their capacity at this point, given the facilities that they
Well,
have.
the Abilene program really used this as a rationale for expanding their satellite to fill up their capacity via the delivery of education and everything.
Right, and as Chris mentioned, we've got 2 new schools coming online, the one in Kingsville and the one in Incarnate Word, and it was Incarnate Word, right?
Yes.
And then the Abilene program. So we are boosting capacity, and we'll have higher production as a result of those schools as well. So that's factoring into the analysis.
Help me remember, what, and Kingsville is still here, is there expectation to have a bigger class than 71 in time?
In 4
Like
years,
what?
in 4 years, they'll have a class of 100 according to their planning document.
Okay.
So will the University of Incarnate Word.
And those numbers are built in?
Yes, into the projections for graduates that you saw.
Does this also include the issue of whether it be a new program or a satellite program? Because we've seen both of those kinds of pharmacy schools coming online to address the need in the Metroplex.
We could expand our satellite programs. They're relatively small programs right now compared to the main campus. The problem is most of them are built on the concept that all new students start on the main campus, and then in their 3rd and 4th year of pharmacy education, they go out to do a lot of their clinical instruction. And so you have the capacity problem on the main campus. In order to build that capacity, I would presume you'd have to start all the schools at the satellite site, or all the classes, first-year classes at the satellite site. And that would, of course, require a building, more instructors. All of that is money.
Which I think the people that always request this study and want to look at this issue, that's what they want in the Metroplex area. It's a full-fledged program, not where they have to leave the Metroplex area and then come back, correct?
Yes,
I mean, that's what they're looking
Language, I
for.
think, says new pharmacies.
Yeah, they don't want like it is now.
As you recall, we've had requests for pharmacy schools that the board has postponed a decision on in the past.
That's why we like private schools. Yeah, I say, private schools address it differently.
Well, that's right, that, good that Incarnate Word came up to the table on this, because in California, they play it a different way, and they have 5 private schools in the state, 2 public schools. The 2 public schools have relatively small enrollments.
Interesting, so it's private education in California.
That was what I was wondering, is have we looked at other models in other states that maybe the criteria would indicate that it's more effective, a more effective use of the facility, of dollars, of professors, of all those kinds of things? So that whether it's going to be a new private school or whether it's going to be a part of an existing university campus or attached to a hospital, that we've looked at those kinds of models to see that whichever one we would recommend, or that you all would recommend as a result, would be the most effective model.
Cost-effective model.
Well, cost-effective, facility effect, just everything.
Right. We have not looked at that, although I would think private schools would be the advance there.
That's kind of easy, isn't it?
But there are other types of partnership. If we continue to promote public schools, there are certain types of collaborative arrangements which might reduce the cost for.
Well, I would hope we continue to promote public schools.
So you'll try to find out how many are leaving
Yes, we will.
out of state?
Great. Okay. Any other questions or comments? Thank you very much. Good work. Okay, the next item on our agenda is item 5, which is consideration of a recommendation to the board on a request from the University of Houston for an off-campus higher education unit. The committee will hear a presentation on this item from Dr. Don Foss, who's in the front row here. Don is Senior Vice Chancellor for Academic Affairs for the University of Houston system, and he's going to make a presentation to us and will be available to answer our questions as well. And have we distributed our handouts to the full committee?
If you will look in your annotated agenda materials here, you will see the presentation material that Dr. Foss has.
Great. Welcome, Don.
Thank you very much. I'm very pleased to be with you. Good morning. At this moment, 3 months to me sounds like a long time, given what has happened at the University of Houston recently, and we really appreciate the opportunity to come before you this morning to talk about our proposed plan. A couple of years ago, the Board of Regents at the University of Houston did a strategic planning exercise, and as a part of that, looked at the demographic analyses in the Houston metropolitan area, and looked very much at the northwest region of that city. I think we have handed out a little map that's hard to read, but the quadrant we're referring to is the region that's north of Interstate 10 and west of Interstate I-45 and outside Loop 610, what I suppose at one time was the boundary of the city of Houston. Long since that is not true. The population in that quadrant and the growth in that population has been dramatic. In 1990, there were about 875,000 people. Today, there's 1.4 million people in that quadrant, an increase of 60%, and the projections bring that population to 1.7 million within less than a decade. So this is a fast-growing area. I want to give you a little bit of this demographic background just in order to show about what we think are the needs in that area. This area is served at the community college level primarily by North Harris Montgomery Community College District, and that district has over 45,000 students in the community college program, many of whom are on the academic track, perhaps on a statewide basis, an above average number that are on the academic track. In addition, in this region, the school population is approximately 185,000 school children, and by 2010, the projections are that will be close to 250,000 school children in that area. So this is a very, very large area in terms of its population. The University of Houston proposes to open a branch campus in this region. This in effect has been a part of the plan of the system for a while, and there have been some earlier efforts to locate higher education in that region, but recently an opportunity that has come to us that has stimulated us to attempt to move this quickly forward, and that opportunity is shown on your little map there as the putative location of a campus that would be the University of Houston Northwest. It is very much in the center of this district and very much in a growth area. This location is about 47 acres of land that houses 3 office buildings, plus another very large building that also has offices and was a light manufacturing and warehouse for the old Compaq computer. This is a high-tech campus. Very nice physical location, trees, walkways. It includes 4 parking decks that hold about 1,500 cars, and a total gross square feet of approximately 600,000 square feet. This property has been offered to us at what our consultants suggest is a very competitive price, approximately $35 million for the land and the buildings. The buildings are approximately 20 years old. They are in good shape. They would require some renovation for academic use. The chillers are only 3 or 4 years old. It was a location for compact computers, so in those buildings there's a area with a raised floor ready for IT activities. There's a cafeteria in one of those buildings. It is a remarkable physical facility that is sitting there right now, mostly empty. There's some space in there that HP, who inherited this building when they took over Compaq, that HP still uses. So that has been, this opportunity has been the stimulus for us to work on this on a very quick timetable, and I would like to say we really appreciate the staff of the coordinating board working with us so intensely as they have in the last short number of weeks. So we propose to put an upper-level undergraduate and master's institution in this area that, as I mentioned before, would be a branch campus of the University of Houston. And we would put in there, as our proposal suggests, we're asking for permission to put 44 degree programs, not all at once. We would start with high demand areas, education, business degrees, psychology, a few others, to ramp up the enrollment in that area. The philosophy of this is quite different than what the University of Houston has done in the past, developing multi-institutional teaching centers that have grown quite slowly with what I would say are small investments in them. And those have been nice centers, but this idea is more bold, I guess I would venture to say. And as you will see from the fiscal pro formas, also is, as I've been calling it, a kind of all-in Texas Hold'em type proposal, in that we would need to make a very serious investment in this facility in order to have a real presence in this area to attract the students and to produce the number of bachelor's degrees that would help us close the gaps in the state of Texas. So the mission of the school will to provide high quality undergraduate degrees and master's degrees, and to provide out there the student support services that would support students, have advisors out there, and so on. We have had some preliminary conversations with the North Harris Montgomery Community College, and the University of Houston, as you may know, has a number of articulation agreements. We recently signed a very big one with the Gulf Coast Consortia for co-advising students. We would certainly do that with North Harris. Indeed, we've had some very preliminary conversations about co-locating some of their facilities on our campus, which we would see as a tremendous seamless opportunity for the students in that area to begin their education in that community college, and then to transfer into the University of Houston campus, a place where they may be used to coming to anyway. We would staff this with faculty members to begin with, many of them not necessarily on the tenure track, people who would have advanced degrees. And the goal of this, in terms of its academic orientation and organization, would be as follows. The faculty would be hired by the departments and the colleges at the University of Houston. They would be vetted by the same faculty as vet our current faculty in terms of their qualifications. Some of our faculty would teach at this center for part, or in some cases perhaps all, of their teaching assignment. But all the new people that we would hire would be vetted, as I said before, by our deans and department chairs in the disciplines. So the Bauer College of Business would vet the instructors at Bauer Northwest, which would be a part of this facility. The plan is to appoint a campus dean who would sit on the Council of Deans on our campus in order to help facilitate on a monthly basis good communication among the campus dean and the deans of the various disciplines, colleges at the University of Houston, and that there would be evaluation of faculty that would be done both by the campus dean and by the departments in which these individuals would teach. We certainly see the opportunity for some students, take for example in a field like biology, where we might not build advanced biology labs, at least initially, at the Northwest site, but we would intend to have transportation, point-to-point transportation to our campus and this campus running constantly, so that some of those students might one afternoon a week or one evening a week come to our campus to do an advanced biology lab, for example. So our goal is to have the quality of the degree at this location be comparable to, and it would be, a University of Houston degree. So we certainly have a vested interest in ensuring that the quality of those degrees would be the same as the quality of the degree at the University of Houston. We would phase in these degrees. Obviously, would not start all of them at once, and in conclusion, I don't want to take too much of your time here because I'm sure you have questions. We believe that this area, which has a stupendous number of college-eligible students, that we would reduce the barrier of transportation and other barriers in order to get more students from that region attending upper-level undergraduate programs and also master's programs that we would offer in that region. I might anticipate one question that you would have, and that is we would expect, at least initially, that some of our existing students, or the students that would normally come to the main campus of the University of Houston, might go to the Northwest campus, and so in some sense we would be cannibalizing some of our own students. But we believe that with appropriate information activities and working with the high schools and the community colleges in the region, that we would on a very short time frame increase both the capacity for bachelor's and master's degrees in that region, and in fact the number of students from that region who would indeed get bachelor's and master's degrees and thereby make a real contribution to the Closing the Gaps program. Thank you, Madam Chairman.
Don, questions?
I had one when you made your presentation last week, and we weren't allowed to ask questions, so I'm glad you're back today. Thank you. The MITSE, can you help me understand you at University of Houston's relationship with the current one that's there, what you plan to do, and to use your word, cannibalizing? I would have real concern if there was going to be a direct approach to try to dilute the effectiveness of that MITSE. I assume there's, from your statistics, there's plenty of students for everyone. But could you address what University of Houston plans to do in that regard?
Up in the Woodlands, we have a presence. We are not the commanding presence there at this point in time. I would say that Sam Houston would be the commanding presence. But that location, I've been trying to think of the right metric, and I think stoplights is the metric. That location is about 22 miles from this location, and a tremendous number of stoplights. And just as a point of reference, the University of Houston Clear Lake is 20 miles from the University of Houston. So they are closer together. And I think that just as there are enough students in that segment of our community to make the University of Houston, and we don't worry, quote unquote, about our competition with that school. I think in a very short period of time, this would not be an issue. And you put your finger on the reason why. There's a tremendous number of students up there.
How far is this site to downtown? Your downtown campus?
It was in the supplement sheet, or it was in the matrix that Kevin put together.
So will you stay at Mincy, or do you plan?
We would anticipate staying and letting the market sort that out.
But part of the process that they have to go through is to share this proposal with other institutions in the area, so that I don't know if it's been sent out yet.
We expect to send it out tomorrow, as a matter of fact. Yes.
Transparency.
That's right. So everyone in the area will have an opportunity to comment.
I guess, and Kevin is doing the staff review of this. Is there anything you would like to say to the committee or give us any insights, Kevin? And y'all may have questions for him as well. And as Kevin comes forward, you know, y'all will probably know the answer to this, but I don't. This proposal was received last Thursday. That's right. Is that correct? From University of Houston. And, you know, for it to be on the July agenda. So once again, this is something that's happening very quickly under the gun. What requires the immediacy of this? I mean, is this just an opportunity that's a once-in-a-lifetime deal? You don't want to lose the... That
is correct. That is, it's the real estate opportunity and the timing of the purchase possibility, which does have a time clock on it. So if we are going to do this, we need obviously to know whether we're going to be approved to do the academic component of it before our regents would make the investment.
So which came first, the chicken or the egg? The university's desire to move into this geographic area, or the availability of this kind of pre-existing corporate campus that could be changed into a university campus?
The first thing that came was the university's desire to serve that region, as I mentioned.
So this was in your master plan, looked at for a long time?
Yes. The community invited out President Gouge and Chairman Hermes to that area, along with a couple of other folks, to talk. This is only about 6 weeks ago, to talk about their desire to have us come out there, our campus come out there. And the president said, well, we would like to, but we were facilities challenged. And shortly after that, the county judge called the chairman and said, you may be interested to know about this possibility, and that's what triggered the activity, was the prospect of the facility.
So this is pretty much being driven, the inception of this, by that community, wanting y'all's presence there.
Yes, and our desire to serve the region.
Right. Okay. Kevin?
Sure, I just wanted to say that we have jumped on this very quickly to apply the existing criteria that we use to evaluate any proposal for a branch campus, centered around the general categories of need, quality of resources, and cost. And I've submitted a number of questions to Dr. Foss and his staff, and they're working hard to provide some answers very quickly. One of them happens to be the question that Ms. Neal asked about the impact of the proposed branch campus on the Mitzi and the Woodlands. But I'll be happy to answer any other questions.
Hope I phrased this correctly. Is there any way to show that this particular area would attract students that come from a demographic profile that would not necessarily enter into college? Is that
phrased correctly?
Yes, it
See what I'm
is.
saying?
In fact, that's a question that we posed to the institution in a slightly different way. How would the University of Houston improve the college-going rate of students in the area, particularly of those from underrepresented groups, and ensure that the branch campus reflects the demographic of the area? Is that what you're asking?
That's basically it. It's hard to tell from this document what the real demographics of that area is. And out of all the areas in Houston, is this here, and I'm from San Antonio, so I'm speaking way out of school here, is this an area that we really will increase closing the gaps by attracting those students that would not necessarily, or don't have the profile that would typically go?
It's a large region, so you can slice it in various ways, but the first look at it suggests that there's about 15% African-American students in that region, at least that many Hispanics, probably a fair amount north of that in terms of the percentages, 5, 6, 7% Asian students in that area. Again, don't hold me to these numbers quite yet. And one thing that the University of Houston has certainly done and knows how to do is to attract and recruit students from these groups. As you know, we have no majority group on our campus.
I guess I want to make sure that these are students that, again, they may be from underrepresented groups, but they may be not necessarily first-generation college students that are making up your numbers with respect to the Houston campus today. I mean, I don't know that. So I want to make sure that these are students that don't have the profile that would necessarily engage them to go to a four-year institution. So if there's any way to quantify that, that'd be interesting.
That's an important question, and I'm not sure you actually have the answer yet, or we do, but I think it's important to note that last time we looked at enrollment growth related to closing gaps in the Houston area, Northwest Montgomery accounted for the largest percentage increase in Hispanic students, which does not necessarily mean that there's students who wouldn't be going otherwise.
Right, and that's the clarification.
But part of the potential, if this were to take place, is if they work together to take those students to the next step. I don't know if they're going on. We could do some analysis to see if the students to what extent students from North Harrison Montgomery are entering into a four-year school anywhere.
Right.
That might be something.
Right, and that's also hard to see within this document here.
That's right, and we could potentially look at the school profile for the area to see level areas of schools identified economically. And if we don't have any data on the first time with Harrison Public School, that's a real limitation for everyone's data. But we could look at are there larger numbers of economically disadvantaged students in those schools, and are they? We could look at that statewide. We could look at are those going at lower or higher rates of college than is the case statewide. And we can dance around it a little bit. On our end, UH might be able to do more on their end.
We want to make sure that it's happening deliberately, and I know there's strategies that UH is doing and it's succeeding at, but the true closing the gaps number that we need are those that are totally really underrepresented.
Yeah,
right.
Wouldn't be going otherwise.
Right.
And Laurie has a question, but if I could follow up on that with, do we have any kind of data on location of a campus in an area, what kind of percentage increase we do see of these kind of non-attending students that all of a sudden the door is open just because of a location issue? Do we have anything on that in other places? Where new campuses, do you understand what I'm asking?
Oh, yeah.
I mean, just putting the facility, if you build it, they will come.
Right.
Are they kids that really wouldn't come if it were not built there? Or would they drive the 22 miles or 27 or whatever it is?
Cy-Fair College might be a good example of that. They opened only a few years back and have grown considerably. I think they're almost 10,000 students now.
And I think you can look at UTSA when they open the downtown campus, but we need to really check to see.
Are those students that would have gone
or they fit the true profile
to the University of Houston, but now.
Is there a trend that they're going on to complete their degree? That's what I'm interested in.
Ask that again.
Like Cy-Fair, this community college, are the numbers there that are showing that they're not doing terminal degrees at the 2-year level? Are they really going on to college? Not to college, excuse me, I didn't mean it that way, to complete their 4-year education? Because you can have numbers all over the place, but if they're really stopping at the associate level with no intention of going forward, I want you all to succeed. If you're going to do this, we want it to work as much as you want it to work. So,
And I guess if they're really attracting and going to serve underrepresented groups, it would not be nice to serve underrepresented groups in underrepresented areas. And it's a shame that there are no engineering bachelor's degree within the first, phase 1 programs. Because obviously, again, we have a lot of underrepresentation in some of these areas, and it would be nice to kind of match the two.
Is there anything that
makes sense.
University of Houston has learned from its efforts at Clear Lake or downtown or its Fort Bend Center? I haven't heard of it somewhere.
Cinco Ranch.
Cinco Ranch. That would give you any idea of how the participation might change or where the students are coming from that might be different from the typical.
I think we could probably respond to that. As you know, I'm fairly new at the University of Houston, so for me to answer that would be made up.
And it's really more for our own staff to check out and to dig around and make sure.
This is a big issue, the college going rate, and it is. I really do applaud the efforts of the coordinating board to draw attention to and focus on this subject. One of your commissioners has started in Houston a PK-16 council, which we actively participate in, and we are. Everywhere we can do, where we can go, we are bringing a public attention to this issue. It's going to take more than higher education to really address this issue. The whole population. I mean, Houston has to understand this. One of our economists, Barton Smith, recently made a presentation to businessmen in Houston and put out the challenge that when you look at the number of bachelor's degrees in Houston among the top 60 cities in the United States, we rank 57th in terms of bachelor's degrees. I mean, it is the number one challenge. When Houston did its report card on various levels of competitiveness with other cities in the country, the lowest grade it got was a C- in number of bachelor's degrees. It was in the low 20s. So the more that we understand the need to increase higher education in our region, the more that we understand the particular our new population, the demographics of that population. I mean, I looked at the other day as part of the PK-16. We have in the Houston region 1 million students in the public school system, 1 million students. And I looked at the grades, what was in each grade. If you look at the ninth grade, you have 85,000 students in that million in the ninth grade. If you look at the senior year in high school, we have 55,000 students. It is the drop off from the ninth grade to the 12th grade is incredible, and then the drop off of who's going from the 12th grade into college we have not seen an increase in the Hispanic college going rate. I mean, that's a huge challenge for Houston. Specifically to the question of MITCs or Clear Lakes or people in regions. What a university normally does, and particularly through its College of Education, is that it will start programs with particular schools. I mean, our College of our Department of Mathematics, for instance, in Houston, has a program in Sterling High School. Sterling High School can't teach the recommended curriculum in math. I mean, we went in there, we got a grant from GE, from General Electric, to go in there and work with them. We thought we would be working with teachers that could teach geometry and algebra. We basically had to hire our staff to be able to teach those courses, or to help the teachers teach that courses, because what we were trying to do is create a pipeline of students coming out of Sterling High School that would then be able to apply because they had the recommended curriculum to get into the University of Houston. I mean, I will tell you, just looking at the math issue alone, I mean, it is I honest to God believe that college algebra is the passport into middle class life. I mean, if you look at the high school level, the number of students passing statewide algebra, it's in the 40s. You know, the number of students that are able to come to U of H and pass college algebra, it's about 45%. I mean, we absolutely have to take this on. Have we taken it on? I would say in a very fragmented way. I mean, I do think that it's efforts like the PK16 councils and what to go to college, you know, the efforts that you are making, we need to really rally a large public support and a consciousness about this issue.
Thank you. Lori had a question.
Yeah, mine is really more comment and support for the program, and maybe I'm the cleanup batter or something at this point, but one of the things that I wanted to mention in answer to some of your questions is the surrounding districts of where this branch campus will be are, for the most part, majority minority. They're considered urban districts because they're like more than 20,000 students. One of them in particular, Spring Branch, is 53% Hispanic, and probably about 40 to 50% on free and reduced lunch. In particular, the north part of that district, which is the closest to this campus. Cy-Fair School District, which is, this program will be literally in the heart of Cypress Fairbanks Independent School District, is the third fastest growing district in the state, probably going to surpass Dallas in the next few years because it's like expanding beyond its wildest expectations. They can't build buildings fast enough. In fact, they're even talking about perhaps putting an early college program with Cypress Fairbanks, North Harris Montgomery Community College, and UH on this campus. To me, from my perspective, and I guess from the other hat I used to wear on the school board, this is in fact a dream come true, because these school districts in the surrounding area, Klein, Tomball, Cy-Fair, Spring Branch, Alief, and even the west part of the Houston School District, really have no place to go other than into the city or out. And this will be like a focal point. It will be really a gem to be able to draw these students in. When Chairman Hermes called me, I guess it's only been a couple of weeks ago, and said that this opportunity literally fell into their laps with a phone call from the county judge. And the reason that they're acting so fast and so quickly is to be able to open as soon as possible. But he even made the comment to me that, gosh, when you think about U of H Central Campus with 38,000 students, and UHD, University of Houston Downtown, these students, I think he said almost 8,000 live in the Cy-Fair area, and UHD is majority minority, and UH Central is no majority. And I think back on what Chancellor Gooch said to my kids when we had the Prejudice Awareness Summit held on the campus at the University of Houston, and he said to these kids, he said, "You look like our campus. You are the kids that we want here in 4 years." And he challenged them and said, "We want you here." These are, for the most part, minority, urban, first generation, probably 80% free and reduced lunch kids. So, the economic impact, as the provost has said, this is really an impressive study that the University of Houston, I think, in thinking totally out of the box, commissioned this study by Barton Smith, the economist, to look at the economic impact of the University of Houston on the city of Houston. It was said in passing, anecdotally, that if we were to get the Olympics, which we keep trying to get the Olympics, but obviously not the Winter Olympics, but if we keep trying to get the Olympics as we are, that would bring like something like $3 or $4 billion into the city, and U of H alone brings $1.1 billion annually into the city in new funds and $3.126 billion in total economic benefits annually. Forget the Olympics. This is, the heart and soul of our city is higher education at U of H. And then this actually was an insert into the Houston Chronicle. It's a letter from our mayor, and it says, higher education in Houston, who cares? It said, you should. Here are 5 million reasons why. So I think that the bigger picture, if we can back away from the thought of, Northwest Campus, a branch campus, the bigger picture is what U of H is presenting to the Houston community and the need for it. So, I was so impressed that they are able to act quickly, and also thanks to the staff that you all responded and were able to put it on the agenda for July. So, just some little tidbits, and I'm hopeful that you all will bring this for all the board members at the July meeting.
Great.
Yeah.
I'd love to see that.
I'll pass around.
I appreciate my own articulateness in this, and I will close.
You'll leave the last word to Laurie. Don, thank you so much. Kevin, was there anything else you wanted to add?
Nope, that's it.
Do y'all have any more questions? Obviously, in a very short period of time, our staff has a lot of work to do in conjunction with the University of Houston, because our greatest need in this state is to open up access, and not just to have the facilities, but to have the mindset of our students that they want to go to college and it is available to them to go to college. And certainly more geographic availability will open those minds as well. So there are a lot of questions that have been asked. Elaine had some excellent ones, as well as everybody else on the committee. And everybody will work diligently to try to answer those questions so that we can open up more opportunity to students in Texas, because that's what we're all about, is trying to do that. So don't think we're being negative because we ask a lot of questions. This is just what we do. And it is our job to do so, to make sure that we meet the needs in the most cost-effective and the most academically efficient and most academically excellent way that we can in the state. So we want to help you do the job that I know y'all want to do at the University of Houston as well. And Kevin has a lot of work to do.
I do. I'll get to it.
Great, thank you. And we look forward to your report and hearing back from everybody at University of Houston at our July meeting. And I assume the staff will have a recommendation at that point. But we're just obviously not far enough down the road to have that yet, and there are lots of other questions. And if anybody comes up with anything that you'd like us to add to this, I'm sure Kevin would just love to have some more things to look into, right? Thank you. And thank you so much for your presentation, Dawn. And we look forward to seeing you in July. The next item on our agenda is item 6, and it's consideration of a recommendation on a request from Texas Southern University for an off-campus higher education unit. They have withdrawn this request and have indicated that they will resubmit their proposal at our October board meeting. So, but we already had it on here. When they first indicated to us, it was verbally that they were going to remove it, and we didn't want to take it off the agenda until we actually had that in writing, that was what was occurring, because, there are a lot of issues at Texas Southern right now, and we wanted to make sure that we weren't kind of moving too quickly on that, but we have received that, so they will withdraw this and bring it back at our October meeting. So the next item is item number 7, and it's a report on the Technology Workforce Development Grants Program. And there is no action required on this, and Dr. Cornelius will give us an update. Welcome.
Good morning. I will report to you on the TTEC Texas Youth and Technology Demonstration Project, and that is just a new name for competition for the Technology Workforce Development Grants Program. And this competition is the 4th we are currently conducting. The agency signed an interagency agreement with the Texas Workforce Commission for $1 million in federal funds from the Department of Labor. And this money was given to TTEC, the Texas Engineering Technical Consortium, from the governor's office. This biennium, there was otherwise no state appropriation for this program. However, the members of TTEC are still keeping the organization going, and they're looking forward to the next legislative session. In addition, there's a possibility that the governor will give TTEC another $2 million for the next fiscal years for the same program. We therefore tailored this new demonstration project, this new grant program, to the unique constraints on the money which is funding it. The grants will have a phase one, which is capped to $95,000 per grant, so that we will end up with at least 10 grants. The grant period for this phase one is uncommonly short. It will start in August and will end in March of next year. And this is because of the constraints given to us by the Workforce Commission agreement. In addition to the phase one, there can be a phase two, which would allow the same projects to continue for another 12 months with double the funding of phase one. And this phase two will depend on renewed funding, and so therefore we ask that all proposals are written with two budgets, for separate budgets for phase one and phase two. New for this fourth cycle of competition in TWD, the Workforce Development Grants Program, is that for the first time all of engineering can participate, plus the computer sciences. In previous years we restricted the grants to electrical engineering and computer sciences, and this was because of the source of the private industry donations. Our advisory committee asked us to allow each institution to submit to us two proposals. We have a very tight schedule for this competition. We published the program announcement on June 1st on our website. However, we also alerted all the institutions already in March, right after we signed the agreement to this upcoming program, and put on the website all the characteristics and constraints. The deadline for this proposal will be July 1st. Then we know how many proposals we get, and we will conduct a review in the first 2 weeks of July. This will be a teleconference review with phone calls and a specially designed tool for the ranking of the proposals. We have experience with that from the ARP and ATP programs. Dale Sherry here at the agency developed this very nice tool. The advisory committee is scheduled to have a meeting the day before your board meeting, and they will then look over the review process and consider whether to recommend to you the ranked list of proposals for funding. We plan to have the chair of our advisory committee present at your board meeting and summarize the committee's assessment of this program to you. Then the grants will start August 1st. The Technology Workforce Development Grants Program is now well established. We have to date funded 73 projects at 25 institutions with involvement of 34 different departments. And the funding total is $14 million. Our estimate is that these programs so far have benefited over 3,000 students in each of these categories in recruitment, retention, mentoring, and outreach to high schools. If we look at the sub-goal of closing the gaps in success in technology degrees and certificates, the state is behind its target. This program, TWD, addresses about 1/3 of this sub-target in technology degrees by concentrating on bachelor degrees in engineering and computer sciences. The actual first 5-year target for these technology degrees and certificates has reached to only about 25%. If Texas wants to reach the 2010 target, it needs to educate almost 10,000 more students a year in engineering, computer science, math, and physical sciences. This means that we will need to help succeed 3,000 to 4,000 more engineering and computer bachelor degrees, or bachelors per year in 5 years' time. And this would not only, if Texas can do that, would only be closing the gaps in success, but also in excellence. Thank you.
Thank you. That's why I asked my last question. About the University of Houston. I mean, this is vast.
Pardon me?
I'm just,
It does. Absolutely.
They've had some projects funded through this as well.
okay, good.
Yeah, in January we had, KeyTech had, and the coordinating board helped a best practices meeting on the campus of SMU, where over 100 project leaders and industry people came and participated, and they came up with a list of 10 best practices for recruitment, retention, mentoring, and outreach. And
How many of those programs are actually outreaching to elementary schools?
so far, none. Elementary schools are not included. And so far, outreach was possible to high schools. This new program has a stronger emphasis on outreach to high school than before, and it specifically asked that the target students will be 14 to 21 years of age.
Right.
But it will only go to middle schools for that.
Right, and I think that's a shame. If there's any way to get folks to rethink that, it's when you go to a middle school and ask what does an engineer do, and or an elementary school, and the answer is drive trains and fix engines, which are some too. We need to get kids really thinking about changing the environment, having new organs made out of new materials, about becoming engineers long before they enter 6th grade and determine what algebra or what mathematics they're going to take. So if there's any way to encourage people to go further down the pipeline and talk about all the different things engineers do, then perhaps when they're in high school, it's not too late to take all of the required courses to be prepared, and therefore increase the persistence of engineering students, especially in the underrepresented groups. So.
One of the best practices points coming out of that meeting was actually not going that far, but the idea of addressing high school counselors who are often ill-prepared to counsel their students to go into engineering, and they often give advice not to go based on their background information.
Linda has something.
The constraint with the age group 14 to 21 is a federal constraint.
Right, I understand. Y'all are really boxed in by the funding strings.
Okay, there are 3 different federal funding sources actually for the money, and they each come with constraints, but the 14 to 21 is federal. That's all I just wanted to point that out. We realize that we need to reach deeper.
For a point of awareness, whether you can, how you reprogram these bright brains into realizing they're smart enough and good enough to be engineers.
And there's something interesting to do.
Yeah. And we need them.
On Earth,
I don't know how you get over that.
Good point. Any other questions or comments? Thank you very much. Excellent. Okay, agenda item 8 is consideration of a recommendation to the board for approval of the delivery of board recommendations to each legislative standing committee with jurisdiction over higher education, a feasibility study regarding the automatic admission of certain associate's degrees and certificate holders. This was also a requirement of the legislature in Senate Bill 1227, Section 58, and I believe that's due by October 1st, correct, to the legislature. Yes. And Dr. Catherine Parsono. I never say that correctly, so I hesitated. I'm sorry. Because you preempted me to say it correctly. Parsono is going to give us a summary of the findings, but we are not ready for a recommendation at this point, correct?
No, we're still doing some crunching internally. Good morning, and thank you.
I think that you'll see some connections with some of the questions you were asking about capacity and throughput in the Houston scenario. The research that we've done in response to Senate Bill 1227, Section 58, however, looks at statewide information. We performed this study using data that was reported by all of the institutions to the Higher Education Data Center. Then it has to be certified by the data center. And we looked at 5 different types of awards: academic associate degrees, the associate in arts, and the associate in science degrees that are intended as transfer vehicles to 4-year programs. The applied or technical associate degrees, the Associate of Applied Science, some of these through field of study curricula that are approved by the board do have pathways into bachelor's degrees, but those also include a lot of associate level degrees that are intended for workforce preparation. Level 1 and level 2 certificates, because that was a requirement of the statute, even though these are again workforce related, and a minuscule number of students actually try to transfer into a baccalaureate program on the strength of the certificate. Core curriculum completion, and this is something that I think the board is familiar with. We implemented a fully transferable core curriculum statewide for public institutions in 1999. Since 2001, we've collected data on core curriculum completers as a separate group. And then we also looked at all those students who had earned 30 semester credit hours or more at a community college within the 6 years prior to the years under consideration. We looked at the last 5 years for which we have complete data, which is 01 through 04, 05. We've got some patterns that I can report on. Undergraduate transfer is robust across Texas. Students in these categories who apply for transfer are generally accepted. In fact, because some of these students apply to more than one place, acceptance rates commonly came out to be more than 100% in these categories. The enrollment rates for students who apply and are accepted are also high. The academic associate degree holders who applied and then enrolled at a rate of about 80%. The core curriculum completers, the same. If they applied and were accepted, it was about an 80% enrollment rate. For the technical associate degrees, if they applied and were accepted, about 65% of those students actually enroll. And for those with more than 30 credit hours but no other award, no associate degree, no core completion, if they applied and were accepted, they enrolled at about a 70% rate. So that's the good news. The surprise is the extraordinary low number of students who are qualified to transfer, who are taking advantage of this opportunity. The only group that we studied that had a rate above 10% in application were the academic associate degree holders. They tend to apply, about 25% of those students tend to apply. Now, this is just students who received the award and went right on. We don't have a reliable way to capture those students who get their associate degree, drop out or stop out for a couple of years while they decide what their next step is, and then step back onto the dance floor, as it were. But for students who continue right on through, these are the figures that came out in our study. So about 25% of qualified as academic associate degree holders for any of these 5 years actually bothered to apply. If they apply, it's all, uphill or downhill from there, whatever you want to say, but they get in and they do enroll at a substantial rate. Core curriculum completers only applied at about an 8% rate, so only about 8% of the students who were qualified in this group applied. The rest of them aren't even trying.
That means core curriculum.
Guaranteed.
The 42 semester credit hour academic core curriculum that's required by law of every student who receives a baccalaureate degree in public universities. Of the technical associate degrees, the applied associate of science degrees, only about 5% of students who completed that degree applied to continue with a 4-year program. Again, this is somewhat more appropriate because not all applied associate degrees are appropriate for transfer into baccalaureate programs, but we certainly have streams and pathways available. Field of study curricula exist in some, like nursing and criminal justice, where students may receive a technical associate degree. We also have a number of bachelor's degrees. For example, the Bachelor of Applied Technology could serve some of these students, the BAAS degree as well. For those who have earned more than 30 semester credit hours, and a lot of students tend to apply, around that time, but of the enormous number of students who are qualified through that particular credential, only 4% in each of these years was choosing to apply. And again, I'll remind you, this is according to data that our institutions report to us, and then we consider as a statewide picture. So in terms of the number of students, the largest group of students who apply are the more than 30 semester credit hour. They make up a very large group. Of the ones that are the most likely to actually enroll, that would be the academic associate degree holders. So this has some real implications for capacity at universities if we try to devise ways to increase these transfer throughput rates. We have an automatic admission program already in place by law for top 10% of high school graduates, and universities do try to manage their enrollment. Each university has an office devoted to that function. So there are some concerns there. But clearly, we have a vast untapped pool of students who could qualify to transfer who are not doing so. For those students who choose to attempt to transfer, it's a very good picture. They tend, the institutions, colleges, and universities are working very closely together. These impacts and this report has to do with the potential or the feasibility of a statewide automatic admission program or policy of some kind, particularly for associate degree or certificate holders, possibly for core curriculum completers. But I should also remind you that there's a very complex matrix of articulation agreements, joint admission agreements. The universities and community colleges are already working very closely together. There are many state-level instruments and programs that encourage transfer. So the surprise for us was the low number of students who take advantage of what is, I think, a golden opportunity.
Are you tracking, you're talking about the front door, are you doing any work on the back door?
We do have.
Are they coming out the other end?
We do have some persistence and graduation information. That was not requested as a part of this study, but we hope to do a follow-up study and present that.
The accountability system includes a graduation rate for all community college students who enrolled in at least 30 semester credit hours at community colleges before enrolling, and those rates are
they're very similar.
Yeah. I meant once they get to the 4-year institution, in the 5 years since the core curriculum completion happened, if I'm looking at the right thing, do we know how many of these few numbers are
They tend to graduate at rates very similar to the same rates for native students. So once...
We also have a 6-year baccalaureate graduation rate. If you look at that, after 6 years, about 29% of students who start community colleges full-time have either graduated with a bachelor's degree from the university or are still enrolled.
So we do have that number.
We do have that number. We've been doing that for about 15 years following that. So we've got things that dance around it. The real issue, I think as Kathy pointed out, is we don't have as many going on as we would like. Part of the message is if you're from a community college and you apply to university, you're likely to be accepted.
That's right.
And that's something that may not be understood. Now, I haven't seen these numbers. It probably varies from institution to institution, but I think the rate's still high at most schools.
We only looked at statewide information for this study because the effect of the study would be to influence decisions about a statewide policy. It would take a lot more digging and effort to look at regional or specific institutional trends, partly because most universities have students coming to them from a number of community colleges, and each of those would have to be tracked separately.
Laurie has a question.
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, I have a few comments. We had a Closing the Gaps by Closing the Gaps conference in Houston, and that was actually one of the gaps that we focused on is those students that go to community college and then stop for whatever reason, and that is actually a gap that we've identified. And there was an earlier conference that was put on by UT Health Science Center, and I was invited to come, and there was a whole group of early childhood educators and a whole group of community college, and I was like, how do I put this together? And the whole focus was the frustration and lack of transferability and articulation agreements of early childhood teachers that have the 2-year associates and not being able to be accepted or have any kind of transfer policy. And there was a speaker that was the keynote of that particular event, and his name is Mark Tangler from HCC.
I know Mark. He serves on one of our committees that's advisory committees that's engaged in this work.
And I had found out through asking, I think, Terry, I found out that the commissioner has a transfer advisory committee or whatever, and I asked that Mark be able to at least present a white paper or something to show these kinds of concerns. They're much more than anecdotal. They're very real in that students that take whatever, whether it's a few courses or even get an associate's, that there is sort of a disincentive to get that other 2 years in and the transfer issues. So I think that this is a real important issue, especially in light of the fact that I've heard the commissioner say many times that in closing the gaps, we're going to have to look to community colleges for, what did he say, between 70 to 80%. So just like this U of H deal with the upper division classes, we're going to have to probably look at universities and community colleges in a whole different light, because last time we all checked, whether it's Texas Tech or A&M or U of H or Texas or anybody else, they're not going to be able to take in another 100,000 kids, so they're going to have to go somewhere, and it's going to be community colleges. So I think that this issue is critical to the success in closing the gaps. I think that was all I wanted. Oh, and U of H has a resolution with all of the area community colleges now, and it's in place. I think it's real new, like within the last couple of months, to take in all of the community colleges. So these are the kinds of models that I think we need to look at.
Take in, define that.
Automatic
admission, which is what the legislature wants us to look at here.
There are some, for example, joint admission programs and other programs where certain students with certain majors do receive an automatic admission, but there's no university that we could find in Texas that has an across-the-board automatic admission policy. If you have an associate degree, it doesn't matter where you got it, you're admitted. And there's also nationally no state that we've been able to locate that has a legislatively mandated statewide automatic admission policy. California has a policy for automatic admission that's based on number of credit hours and grade point average, and they split up their policy between the University of California system and the Cal State system. Florida has a law that, with certain conditions of capacity, institutional availability, provides for the automatic admission of associate in arts degrees, but not associate in science, which is the other academic associate degree, or any technical associate degrees. So there's no state out there that has the kind of statewide blanket automatic admission program that was proposed by House Bill 64, which failed in the last session, and then was taken up again as a feasibility study, which is what we're doing now.
Obviously, the hope is that if you make it an automatic admission, they don't have to go through any turmoil, and that would not stop people thinking that they couldn't go on. I think that's an assumption based on that they're not going on because they think they couldn't go. Do we know why they're not going on? I mean, I don't know if we're looking at the right solution. I mean, we need to know why they're not going on.
Yeah, that's certain.
Do we have any of that information available?
Not
maybe.
This may not
creating a solution that isn't a solution to what the real problem is.
Exactly. We don't have that information, obviously, through our data system, which just crunches numbers. This is something that I actually put into the report as an area for further study, because why in the world are the application rates so low?
Yeah.
And what can we do, again, to change that culture? We have a GO campaign to encourage middle school and high school students to attend college. But now we look at 2-year to 4-year students.
I would have to believe somebody's done a study on that.
I think that the Houston Community College has a study on that, as to why students choose not to go on. I believe that Houston Community College, Charles Cook would have that information.
I think that needs to be a factor in this, because this may indeed be the right answer.
You're right.
But it may not be.
Well, the other concern is if we were able to encourage twice the number of applications and thence twice at the same percentage rates the number of enrollments, we would in fact move from, for the 04-05, I just ran a sort of imaginary scenario, if we had been able to have the effect of doubling the applications and thence the enrollments for the academic associate degree holders, the technical associate degree holders, and the core curriculum completers, just those three groups, we would have seen the transfer enrollment increase from what it actually was in 04-05, which was 18,360 students statewide, to over 34,000 students. And of course, then you come into a question of capacity at the universities.
Do they live where we've got capacity?
Exactly.
Probably.
Yeah.
That's the problem. Enter University of Houston.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, exactly.
I don't know the capability of many of the community college students to move to other areas. Some obviously
very limited.
do.
Yeah.
Geography.
Is there availability
You mentioned Charles
geographically?
Cook. We had a pilot study actually at Houston Community College where they identified for students who would progress to the point that there would be likely candidates to move on to a community college, and we worked through the FERPA issues and permissions from students, and they actually provided privacy issues in terms of providing their
federal educational privacy.
Similar to HIPAA.
Yeah. So, yes, exactly.
Translate to her language.
Talk medicine, too.
We provided that to schools all over the state, central follow-up, and it was a pilot, and to a large extent, it really didn't work.
Yeah.
Part of it, we think, was because of the place-down aspect of it. We do know at least one private college actually used it, and they picked up 2 or 3 students. It wasn't many for them. It was a small school. They were actually 300 miles away, I think. So that was something UTSA, I believe, used it. But I think part of it has to do with the place top-down aspect of many of the students. The fact that many are already employed and they're actively engaged in jobs. And the unknown nature of why those students are really there. I mean, even when you accumulate these hours, many of them are though they will say on their intent field that they will belong to a university, in reality, very few seem to do that. And so some of them are there to take a course, some of them, but they may end up taking a course
many times.
Which really,
5 years in a row.
this really goes back to what Lorraine said, and that is we need to find out what the real problem is before we come up with a solution.
And we may have that.
To me,
it creates some other problems.
To me,
it doesn't address why they're really not going.
I think part of what...
And I don't know how you find that out.
Catherine's potentially identified one area that sometimes you find the problem by eliminating things.
Yes.
So it doesn't sound, if I understand the data correctly, that it's students who are applying are not being accepted.
No.
We know that.
But if the perception is that they're not going to get accepted, or they don't feel like they're able to do the next thing.
But the other thing
it could
is
be about
that
perception and not reality.
They may have 30-plus credit hours and find that many of those are not and will not transfer. And they won't, they don't.
Because they're not core curriculum.
Yeah, for whatever reason, there are courses that they've taken that don't parallel the four-year university's first 2 years.
That clearly happens. What we need to share with you, it's been 4 years
No,
ago.
5 now,
5
2001.
So things may have changed, but we had one of the most extensive studies done where institutions actually volunteered to examine thousands of transcripts to see the extent to which that was happening. And
The University of Houston was one of those.
And they didn't find that to be
largely
true.
When it was when courses weren't transferred, it was explainable, and that the grade was very low. There were some instances that looked at it. Those things changed. I think that there was at least one program area where there were some problems.
There were several recommendations that came out of this study that the Transfer Issues Advisory Committee has largely dealt with.
Transferability issue was a huge debate on the coordinating board before I came on, when Steve Lake was still on here, and I remember him talking about that a lot. That people, it really didn't transfer, and the coordinating board and institutions did a lot to clean that up, which can account for, yes, indeed, that really did work.
But that
if
may
they
not be
will
what
apply, they will get in, but they're not applying.
I think there are issues with the type of program I think you're describing, in which are more at some level certificate programs, which are very specific. And Raymond talks to us about this to some extent, the need to have, at least to a greater extent, a core embedded in the programs on the technical side and the certificate side, so because that means they're meeting some of those requirements that are necessary. And we ought to look specifically at that program and see what we can understand.
I asked a question of Chancellor Goosh the other day. I said, how revolutionary would it be if all of the courses had the same numbers in the two-year colleges and the four-year universities? And he said that they actually did that in Utah, where they all had the same numbers. And I said, probably we would be crossing the line to require that as an agency and as a board. But then I started thinking about TEA, and basically that is what is required. If you think of all of the high schools in the state of Texas, all the public high schools, they have the same, English 1, English 2, whatever it is. So I thought, well, then it's not really crossing the line. It's very consistent. But then Chancellor Goosh had a suggestion, and I'd like to throw it out since this is what we're talking about. He suggested that the two-year community colleges have an asterisk placed by the side of all their courses that automatically have a like and comparable course in the four-year universities. And that would require the community colleges and the four-year universities talking to one another, and it wouldn't be saying that the numbers have to be the same, but English whatever translates to.
Ms. Stricker, it's so rare that I can say this. We have an instant answer for you.
Oh, good.
The Texas Common Course Numbering System, which is a voluntary consortium that includes all of the public colleges and universities and all of the private colleges and universities in the state, not the proprietary schools, but the Rices and SMUs and that kind of thing. are all members of the Common Course Numbering System. All of the courses that are offered at all of the community colleges use the Common Course Numbering System. This is for the courses for the first 2 years that are the most usually transferred. And in our rules, we have a rule that all universities must identify all of the courses that they offer at the lower division, the first 2 years, that are equivalent to these courses offered at community colleges. And they're not only required to place an asterisk, that's too subtle. They're required to put in parentheses after their course number, let's say their English is English 301K, okay? I'm not referring to any particular institution here.
Sounds like fun.
After that local institutional number, they would be required then to place the common course number, ENGL 1301 or whatever it is, in the common course numbering system so that students can tell at a glance. That was implemented 2 years ago. It's been in our rules, and all institutions are now required to do that. So I think if you look in the college catalogs, you'll see that's already happening, and I've never gotten to say, we've got an answer for that already.
Well, evidently, not only did I not know about it, but neither did the Chancellor of U of H.
Ken looked in his catalog.
Yeah.
At the catalog.
But what troubles me is what happens to all of the courses that don't have that equivalent, and a student takes that course and then finds out, I've got 12 hours in this, and this, and now I want to transfer to the University of Texas, and none of those transfer, and if they transfer as electives, and you practically have to start an entire semester over.
The vast majority of courses that are offered at the community colleges appear in the Academic Course Guide Manual. That's our statewide inventory of courses from which community colleges select the courses they'll offer. And James Goman, my colleague, and I staff the advisory committee that maintains that, keeps it up to date. Every course, with I think just a handful of exceptions, in the Academic Course Guide Manual has a common course numbering system assigned common number. In fact, part of the process to apply to have a course included in the ACGM, and Mark serves on this advisory committee, by the way, so he's familiar with this. Part of that process is to demonstrate that the institution has applied for a common course number and can demonstrate that up to 5 universities, I think between 3 and 5 universities, have consented to accept that course in transfer and indicated how they would apply it to their degree programs.
You said 3 or 4, but
we have a minimum of 3 to 5 universities that have to say, yes, we'll take this course in transfer.
So how far away are we from then doing what I suggested initially, to just say every course has to have the same number?
The Transfer Issues Committee looked at this about 4 years ago as a result of this transfer study David referred to, and we had input from both community colleges and universities comments as part of that consideration. This is part of the routine work that the committee does. And actually the University of Texas at Austin Provost's office provided a study that indicated that for the number of courses they offer at the upper division and graduate level, to impose the kind of course numbering system throughout, so that there wouldn't be a separate numbering system for the lower division courses and then everything else the university offers. The model for the course numbering didn't have enough available numbers or rubrics. You'd have to add so many different department numbers that are never taught at the lower division that it wasn't practical. And so part of this sort of accommodation that we arrived at came out of a recommendation from this Transfer Issues Committee to be sure that all universities had to identify their lower division courses that are equivalent to courses taught at community colleges, so that all the community college courses ought to be identified at each university as to how they would transfer.
I hate to stop discussion, but sorry, we've got to move through this.
Thank you.
Fascinating report, but really depressing. and of great concern, and there's a lot of questions to be answered, and we're not voting on this. They don't have a recommendation. The initial findings are definitely of great concern, and we look forward to what else you find out as you continue this.
Really
exciting
Just
work.
for
Thank you.
clarification, since it's
Excellent
due
job.
October 1st, will we get to talk about it like in the September committee meeting or something? Because I doubt
yeah, it'll be
much
next
changes in the next month.
I think what we will probably do is ask the board to delegate to this committee the final approval of the study, and then that way we can put it on the September committee meeting in Odessa, and all can revisit it again. But we won't have time before full board meeting, but I think that would work, so.
So it can come back to us before it goes to the legislature.
One quick clarification, the courses Catherine were talking about were academic courses and not technical.
So it's possible, of course, the program you were talking about is not included in that.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Catherine. Interesting. I'm going to switch up just a little bit here and take the update on the undergraduate education study with our discussion of our goals, because that's one of our main 5 academic excellence goals, okay? And so we can just really quickly go through the agenda item 10, which is the rest of the agenda items that are on our July board meeting, and that begins on page 10 of your annotated version that you were given that in advance. And the reason that we did this way, we pulled everything that we thought needed explanation, discussion, things we as a committee needed to give some input on, and then the rest of these we just listed, like consideration of approval of revised mission statements and that sort of thing. That's a 4-year cycle. Those are pretty regular things, but they have to come at full board meetings. So the rest of the agenda is, page 10 through 16 in your annotated version. These will all be on the board agenda that we addressed in July, but I really didn't see a need to go through each one of these, and we have pulled out the ones that we actually did need to discuss, and that's what we spent the last couple of hours doing. So that was kind of how we arrived at this format. Is there anything, as y'all looked over this prior to attending the meeting, that you wanted to pull out or had a question about?
I have a question just to help me remember. When it says being requested, these proposals for all these additional degrees are somewhere in the system right now, coordinating board system, or are you anticipating them coming? Help me know what that means. Has it been requested?
Yes, it has been requested by the institution. The first set you see there there are 2 types of requests. One is the 4-year cycle. Those institutions, Lamar and all the A&M institutions, those are the 4-year cycle, and every 4 years they come and
So these are out of cycle.
and then the others are the out of cycle.
That's right.
The first ones
they're
are
all
like the
asking-
regular 4-year cycle.
Working on all these all the time.
Yes.
Yes, we are.
Yes, all the time.
This is for preliminary approval.
I understand what that
So they
means.
haven't actually brought the degree program forward.
Oh, but
You're asking for
it's in the
permission
pipeline. Okay.
to move forward. So the only actual degree programs to implement that you will be considering started
the ones later.
on page 12. The others are for, in essence, permission from the board
Permission
to
to
plan
proceed.
and move
Exactly.
forward.
Without any promises.
Yes.
Yeah, the final, it means that the board, it means that the board in principle approves the idea the institution can have it, but they have to have all their resources in place, and it's not a
Before
final.
you get to this table.
Exactly.
Okay, any other questions? Okay, then we'll dispense with that. And a couple of y'all have sneaked off, but I haven't had the opportunity, so I have to take a break. So just like a couple of minutes, so everybody can get a soft drink.
So you don't want us to adjourn while
Well,
you're gone?
y'all can go ahead and start the discussion, but I'm leaving for about 2 minutes.
I need to too.
Or I can't concentrate anymore. So just quick break, okay? And we'll be right We are back, and we're going to consider item 11 and 9 combined, because item 9, the update on our undergraduate education study, is a major part of our goal setting. And just a little reminder of our the goal setting that we did. We began that last December in our first conversations about our goals for the committee, and then we briefly revisited, well, we came up with the document, and then we revisited it in March of 2006. It's like, and that was this, but remember we kind of whizzed through that, so we really didn't have time to, but the staff had kind of reorganized it from ways that matched up more with their structures from what we had come up with, and so y'all had an opportunity since then to look at this little one-page quickie academic excellence and research committee. And Linda, you need to move up here with us, because research is you, baby.
She's referring to. Are you talking about the preliminary data point? You're talking about the last page.
Academic excellence and research.
I'm sorry.
Okay?
Thank you.
Which was kind of the just goals for the next couple of years in a real broad-based look. Okay? And we had 5 goals under academic excellence and 3 main goals under research. And Carol will give us just in a few minutes the update on the undergraduate education study, which is our first academic excellence goal. And then we had 4 others as well, and then the research goals. And we had 3 main goals there. So, I hope to have a couple of hours to thoroughly discuss this, but we never
Always hope to.
We never get there, do we?
But we actually, one.
Yeah, it needs to, when we just, okay, well.
We'll do it at your
Yeah,
house.
it needs to be number 1. We'll do it at my house. And we need to do it where it's the only agenda. But I think we're headed, the only item, that's not ever happening, is it? But I think we're headed in a direction that y'all, I hope will find interesting, and it has kind of driven the staff a little crazy as I've looked at this issue. I started thinking about, okay, we just got through a special session. We had the last legislative session. From those sessions, we get tons of legislative requests for information, studies, requirements that are given to us from the legislature. So I asked and we are just welcome all of those, because that means they think that our staff does such a fine job that they want us to provide them high-quality information at the legislature. But that creates a lot of work for our staff here at the coordinating board. So we can have these great little goal-setting sessions as a committee. And I said, if that is not taking into account what the legislature is requiring us to do, and we have all these grandiose ideas about what we want to look at, and then the legislature requires us to look at these other things, so we have, statutory requirements to do this from the legislature. Then we had the new little document from the Strategic Planning Committee that recently met for strategic plan for our whole agency. And we have the Closing the Gaps that completely dictates what we do as a group. Are we looking at these things all together? Because it does no good for our committee to set proposed goals of what we want to do if the staff has no time to address those goals. We have no information to look at to achieve our goals, because the staff is spending all of its time doing what the legislature wants it to do. And are we going in the same direction, or at least know what that direction is that's coming from the legislature? And then strategic planning is determining what the whole strategic plan for the organization is going to be as the coordinating board, not having been given from our committee what our goals are, or having talked to the chair of this committee about perhaps this agency strategic plan might want to incorporate what each of the committees are doing into the strategic plan. So I started asking these questions, and the staff kind of went, oh, no. Oh, no. So what? A lot of conversations with poor Carol here. She has come up with this side-by-side analysis. And we're just beginning on this, okay? And kind of the format she has come up with, which I think is an excellent one, and I'm sure that's with discussion from every other person sitting at this table, is a statutory citation, then our responsibility for that statutory requirement from the legislature, what action is required from that, how that meshes with closing the gaps. It doesn't really matter what comes from the legislature if it fits under closing the gaps. It would just be nice to know if it did, okay? Then what our coordinating board strategic plan is, the overall document, and then our committee's goals and objectives, so that we can adapt what our goals are and align those with what we really are doing at this agency, which is in part determined by what the legislature requires of us and what the overall strategic plan of the organization is, so we can kind of get those things aligned and see what our real time is being spent on, and does this have anything to do with what we're really doing here? Because it would kind of be nice if it did. You understand what I'm saying? because Elaine's kind of giving me one of those,
I'm sorry, I
what
was
the
just thinking-
hell are you talking about?
I'm not giving you that. I'm not. I hear you.
Okay? So it's kind of like, I mean, these are great documents, but if that's the time, if the staff doesn't have time to work on any of those things, then why are we wasting time with that?
Well, and I guess here's where my concern look came in, is that we can be an agency that responds to the bureaucracy, or we can be an agency that really pushes forward higher education. So therein lies the balance that I hope we draw. Instead of this being a document that's out, which is our goals, we got to push towards this and figure out what to do with the rest.
Absolutely.
But say so.
And I 100% agree. And
At the end of the day, do we have more students enrolled in colleges and universities, and are they persisting and have been successful?
Yes.
So,
if I could add one thing, and why I think this is a useful exercise, is that
incredibly useful.
part of what we do internally that you don't see, and I think it's helpful for you, is that we look at what we're required to do by the legislature. We look
It's amazing.
more direction and where Chip wants to go. And part of what we try to do is see where we can match some of them together and to be more effective with our staff time. Sometimes it's not possible. But it's important to do that wherever you can, and we think that some of the legislative work will be useful to do that. So I think this is opportunity to look through some of these and see some of these are very discreet. And they're important. They don't quite fit with other things, but there's really no one else to do them but us. And
Is that why we got them?
well, in some cases that's true, and so, but it's important for you to know that they're there.
Absolutely.
So I think this, while you'll see them from time to time doing something like this, you won't be surprised when they come up. You may have been surprised today with the pharmacy stuff.
But it's right here on page 3.
Here it's there, and
Yeah.
in the future,
Found it.
this extends something we're trying to do better with
Right.
our division. So
And I'm
I think you're right.
You know, this is very valuable.
There's one other point too, that I think we continue to talk about things we need to identify we should stop doing. And things that don't help us close the gaps. And some of them may take us going to the legislature and saying, this was a great idea in 1968, but we just shouldn't be doing that anymore. And so I think going through this and aligning, and actually, Ms. Mendoza, I was actually thinking the same thing you were, that rather than the statutory stuff driving what we do, we need to see what the goals are we need to achieve, and then let's find a more efficient, effective, and less burdensome way to try to carry out some of our other work, because this really is what we need to be doing, absolutely.
And this gives us an opportunity to shine a light on what we want to be doing from a policy perspective and what is actually going on.
Well, and what's
how
weighing
we
us-
can get those aligned together.
I would put it, what is weighting us down.
Exactly.
Yes. Yeah, keeping us from.
Whereas like the discussion we just had about the automatic admission request from the legislature. I mean,
That was a good one.
because when we looked at it, otherwise we weren't getting that same information. So there are some of those requests that really are helpful and do shine a light on what will drive our Closing the Gaps goals, which we looked at our Closing the Gaps initiative and then try to align our goals with that from our committee. And how can we meet the needs of the legislature and frame this whole strategic plan for the agency with actually looking at what's really going on here, which we've never done that. In the 4 years I've been here, my understanding is really had it all on the table. What are the folks in academic excellence and what are the folks in research doing out there? And how does that mesh with Closing the Gaps and all of our goals? So this turned it into a little bit more than I had initially anticipated.
Which is good. I think it's fascinating to
It's
see.
very interesting. Because
Probably
who knew
in terms
all
of
of
the number of statutory requirements.
Incomplete.
Everything's here, but,
Really?
Well,
Is it going to be difficult to fill in the columns? I'd hate to have staff be spending days and weeks. I think it's a worthy endeavor.
And once it's done, it can be updated easier, can't it?
Well,
this does parallel something I've asked, not just this division, mainly accountability to across divisions, because also we can make sure they're working together most effectively on some of these assignments. So,
Planning and accountability.
Oh,
yeah, so
Some of these assignments,
yeah, they
they don't
are.
just fall under our,
that's right.
they fall under several
I
different.
mean, not at all.
If I could just share with you a couple of things about this document. David is right that this is not a complete list of all the statutory responsibilities that are here in the agency. This is a list of the statutory responsibilities that are assigned to the Academic Affairs and Research Unit in the agency. And the people from the Office of Strategic Alliances maintain a database for the agency of all statutory responsibilities that we have. The purposes of this draft and the discussion this morning, since we're sort of pioneers on this, what they have very graciously and very quickly produced for us is a listing of those statutory responsibilities that are assigned to this particular division. And what we have done is to look at that in a very abbreviated fashion to provide you just some baseline information about what kinds of actions are required and see how those requirements for statutory action match up with our intentions through closing the gaps and the agency strategic plan and the committee's goals. Obviously, there are many more statutory responsibilities for this division than there are goals on the committee. So part of what we have part of what our very brief discussion has been so far is that we really need to create some organizers for these statutory responsibilities. And then within that, begin thinking about how those match up to the more discrete goals for the committee.
And I think this was done very quickly after the discussions yesterday. I see at least one thing that the strategic plan for community colleges isn't listed here.
Right, which we have received in the mail end of last week, beginning of this week.
Right. And that's an example of something that we're looked at to we continue to do that. Because in its current form, it's not as useful, and there's some other things that the division might want to do that would be more focused as opposed to that. So that's sort of an artifact of some other things that y'all find at universities. That's something we need to discuss with you.
That's also,
See, that's something that came to light from just looking at this a different way. It's like, well, we don't need to be doing this way. I was wanting to get all of the drivers that are motivating what our time is spent on kind of just out in a way that we could look at it more easily.
Is participation and success going to do something similar?
Nobody else is.
Well,
we're pioneering.
are there overlaps of,
There will be some, and in fact, there is another overlap in the community college strategic plan as an example of that.
so many people could be looking at some of these, okay.
The planning and accountability folks and the strategic planning board committee have. But obviously, that's a joint responsibility as well. So those kinds of joint responsibilities, we still need to go through and add in here. So this is
We need to add that for that, get on here as well.
Another column.
Yes.
Well, what jumped out at me,
falls under
right.
other committees or other divisions of the coordinating board.
What jumped out at me, being the nurse that I am, nursing graduation rate report, that sounds more like participation and success than it does AENR. So I figured there had to be some, more than our sets of eyes looking at these.
And that prevents us from,
reflect that on here.
right, so we don't arbitrarily stick something into one category to say, well, we have to only stick it in one, because there really will be things that just as we have divisions with, these things cross divisional lines within the staff area too. So, no, we think it holds great promise for an entire coordinating board-wide examination. And I think we did not have a chance to talk to the commissioner yesterday because he was headed out of town. But I think that if he were here, he would say that this could very well provide a template for the review. He has been really encouraging us to do, to say, what should we be doing? What should we stop doing in a real sense? And
Well, something like this would be mighty impressive to show your legislators too.
That's exactly what I was thinking.
Because this is one committee's list. If we did the whole bloomin' agency, I bet they don't even realize what they've done.
Again, and then to be able to show where some may not hook to closing the gaps would be very powerful.
So could you move them, please?
How is this accomplishing our goals?
Right.
They're not. Now, not that we don't know what the
That is
legislature's
great potential.
response to that will be, but at least we'll have some information to share with them. So, does everybody think this is a good idea?
Absolutely.
I think it's outstanding.
Stay tuned. I love the acupuncture.
So long as it doesn't bring us
And
to where.
my intent was not at all to have, I don't want to call legislative requirements minutia, but
Busy one.
you did. I just did. Have that drive what we're doing. I want us to be driven by what this committee and the professionals involved with us think will best help us achieve the goals.
Absolutely.
And where we want to be headed with that. But that also needs to, tie into the whole coordinating board strategic plan.
Yes.
And that seemed to be one document going on over here, and we've got our little thing going on over here, and then the legislature's got the other little thing going on over here, and then the staff has all kinds of things going on internally that we don't know about, and so all of a sudden, are we getting where we as a policy group, which is what we're about, want to accomplish? So, and I think that ties in very well with what Raymond's goals are. Although I did not have the opportunity to discuss this with him, this was just one of those, in the middle of the night, you're thinking, and you go, we have just got to have a better way of getting a handle on all this stuff.
And remember that you have an entirely new committee structure.
Right.
So everybody's still sort of feeling its way in terms of what each committee should be doing, and what it wants to do, how it wants to focus, etc. So we're still learning, so it's important. One of these things how as we go forward and where you're not satisfied in terms of the direction of information.
So I'm not saying that I think we need to, overhaul, change, massively redo what our previous discussions have, brought forth with this little one-page goals list, but it just gives us a lot more information.
Good inventory. Absolutely.
So we will continue to work on this.
Yes.
And I do anticipate, Nancy, that other committees will want to have the same.
Follow our lead. Follow our lead.
I can tell you the Strategic Alliance is
Or get out of the way.
thinking about it, how they're going to follow up, that they feel that that's probably going to happen.
I bet more of this is coming. Yeah. And they're ready for that.
They are. They're out there.
Look, nodding.
She did. She and Carolyn Dossie.
They're doing the universal sign for turkey.
So y'all are nodding your heads out there. Well, don't you think this is a illuminating exercise? Good. Well, good. See, so then we're not asking for, once again, minutia, busy work.
We just had a 3 or 4 hour meeting with Laura and Helena on planning and accountability staff.
Wow.
Folks about, I guess, finding, using.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Come on
I know what I
Talking
said.
about, yeah.
They're staying on top of it very well.
We appreciate
We're certainly getting plenty of emails.
Okay, so we will continue with this, which will give us a lot more information about what's really going on here. The first item on the strategic, or on our committee goal, is with 3 areas broken out under it. The Undergraduate Education Advisory Committee creation for the study of undergraduate education, which was our item 9 on the agenda.
Yes.
So we'll go back, if it's okay with y'all, we'll go back to Carol to give us an update on that study.
Thank you. I'm not going to go through all of these data points.
Oh, gosh.
Thank you. That's the good news. These are the preliminary data points that we're looking at to include in this study, and in some, they focus on student demographics, information about program location, program productivity, and some important elements about how students get to school and stay in school. So there is a significant piece of this that relates directly to financial aid. And Lois Hollis and her staff will be providing data for that. The data points that you see here are almost all currently available to the board, and we chose these in part because of that easy availability. The committee had asked for information to be available prior to the start of the new legislative session, and in order for that to happen, we needed to get something to you in December. With data on a relatively short timeline, we wanted to take advantage of the materials that are already available through the coordinating board reports. So the preliminary data points that you see on the material in the agenda covers that, and I'm sure that there will be additions to that, and if you have suggestions for us, we're happy to talk with you about that.
I probably should know this. Do we have an undergraduate education advisory committee meeting? Continue? I mean, are they in progress?
No.
They're not. Terry said yes.
Well, we have some names.
Okay, but they've never convened. Okay.
So these are the initial points for them to consider. And
Bring
what is
back
our
to us.
timeframe for convening the advisory group?
Yeah.
We hope this summer.
Because I'm sure they will have a lot of input.
We're going to be a little more definitive. It will be this summer.
Not we hope, it will be.
Good.
Terry has spoken. It will be
In a
this
report at our
summer. So
September
this summer
meeting in
being-
Odessa.
Well,
Summer starts
Like
June,
July.
maybe.
June 21st to September.
Yeah, at least
or September 6th.
before the start of school.
Will this data include private institutions or just the public institutions?
The principal focus is public institutions, but we do have some iPad data.
It seems like that would make a better picture, more realistic. And also, going back to that first day that I ever saw that House Bill 400, is that what it was? And the shock that I saw seeing some of these high schools on the list of less than 10% of their students graduating, they graduated going to college. In reality, they're going to private institutions or institutions outside of the state of Texas. Those are the kinds of issues that really, they not only make a big difference, but they paint with a broad brush and forget that, if 10% of our students are going to private schools K-12, and if whatever percentage are going to private institutions within the state of Texas or any institution outside, it seems like we're cheating ourselves by not talking about all of our students and where all of them are going.
I have to say once again,
I know we keep bantering back and forth about this.
there's some reality. There is no point of access to private.
Well, maybe we should legislate it.
K-12 data, and that's a,
Maybe that should be
issue.
part of our legislative agenda.
We do have, I'm glad to say, finally, data has gone from here to the National Student Clearinghouse. It took longer than I would have liked, but it is gone. That includes graduates from the publics, high schools, which will allow us to match, at least the records they have for any students. There are students that have applied for financial aid in the country. It's estimated that it's 90% of the students enrolled in higher ed, public and private. So we will have that to the Highland Park, to the high school performing visual arts. I know the school is.
Sure do.
This is a real problem, and it is, and we know it is. And so we will get a better picture of that. We'll never be complete. We're in much better shape than most states, all but one or two in terms of doing this. The private high school data is surely our greatest implementation at this
Have we
point.
ever just
Asked them? Yeah, I mean, it seems to me, they have,
My daughter that just graduated from a private college prep school, I guarantee you if we asked them for the data from her school, they would gladly provide it. Literally on their graduation programs, it has every student's name.
That's
and
right.
what university they're going.
That's exactly right.
My daughter goes to St. Stephen's here in Austin, it's the same thing. We can't try that, we can't do a match, no, we have not asked. We can do that, but we can't.
It's not reliable.
We won't know if it's really true.
Yeah. Or it's what they want it to be.
And I do know a few students, anecdotally from my daughter's high school, who went somewhere different right there. But that would be a better
Well, that certainly doesn't happen in West.
Well, I think that we're doing the state of Texas a disservice by not including all of the students. In particular, the tail wagging the dog, which are the 10% of students going to private school K-12, and of those, probably 99% going on to college. And we're eliminating that big chunk of them, and that is a major closing the gaps issue.
I think the next step, I think it's a good idea, we could probably survey, then we get a list of who all those schools are.
They have an organization, and the interesting thing is if you look at, for example, the majority of the Catholic or Episcopal schools, there are very few of them that actually have a high school component. So we're not talking about thousands of schools. The majority of them are K-8 or K-5, 5-8, 6-8 or something. So we're only talking about the high school information.
Even if it's an unaudited number, at least you know that there are private school
I
kids.
just want to be clear that there's a limit to what we can do with it. All we can do with it is to say,
Asterisk.
if the schools have reported, X number have gone on the high rate, here's the institutions.
Out of the state of Texas.
They enrolled.
Right.
In Texas may be out. We do have now all the data for in-state public and private institutions, so at least we don't have the for-profit, the for-profit public, so we've talked to University of Phoenix about providing us with data. They seem inclined to provide us some data that would allow us to do that for them. So we're chipping away at getting more and more of this.
That's good.
So I think this is an idea, frankly, we had not considered this getting, we were so focused on keeping it it's better than what we have.
Yeah.
It's better than what we have. So
Well, and there are organizations, just like ICUT is to the colleges and universities, there is an organization of private schools, and I would think that they'd want to give you the data. I mean, a school like Audi International, for example, that has 25 seniors, I guarantee you 25 of them go on to higher ed. Why wouldn't they want to brag about it? And they do.
That's their whole key to get people to go there.
That's right.
And what private schools they get admitted to.
Well, but really, their SAT scores and their college going rate, that is what makes the reputation of a private school. They don't take tax. They can't say, well, 90% of our kids pass the tax at a commended level. They don't have that stuff. So that is what they base their reputation on.
there is another piece that Susan Brown's not here, but we do have recently received a set of college board data. And so that's still not complete, but it has at least who took the test. And so
Could be unreliable as to where
we
they
did
went.
actually do an estimate with Hopwood by looking at where they had their scores sent to see, did they say, well, we didn't find these folks, but we had another 20% who sent their scores to out-of-state schools. Of course, there is ACT folks that you don't have to. So we'll just keep chipping away at it. We'll probably do a survey and see what we get.
Be interesting.
It will be. So that's and obviously we're still interested in continuing with that. And we will be forming a committee in July or August. And they will still, some of the areas that they're looking at, but I'm sure they will come up with other ones, are the three that we have listed here. Elaine?
Can I ask questions about, the preliminary data points? Is there any way, one thing that I hear about is the 2+ program. Is there any way to identify schools that have a 2+ program? my understanding is if, for example, a student goes to UTSA for the first 2 years and transfers, UTSA is penalized on a graduation rate. Is there any way to quantify if that's true or not by collecting that data?
I've heard that too.
I didn't track that.
You know what? David wasn't paying attention to you, Elaine.
I think I heard him on the last one.
There you go.
Is this thing on? Is this thing on?
Can you hear me in the back? Question, Elaine. Would you
He's still arguing with me.
The two-pass program, is there any way to collect data? If indeed it is an issue that one institution is penalized when a student transfers to another institution and the institution that the student went for the first 2 years doesn't get to count it in their graduation rates, they're actually penalized for it. Is that something we should?
True, but
I don't know that.
three of us have had institutions discuss this with us.
Right, TUT.
Yeah.
Yeah, we can do that.
I mean, I
We
think,
told them we will do that.
okay, so we'll add it as a point?
Laurie's had people complain to her, I have.
The way the week, actually, they're already counted.
Well,
And that's all.
I don't want to belabor the point, but it'd be nice to check it out.
This is an important thing for you to know, though. If you look at what's reported to the LBB, it does not include students who graduate from another state university. That graduation rate does not. Our graduation rates that we've used since '87 and those that are included in the accountability system count not only those who graduate from, in that case, UTSA, but if they transfer to universities in Austin.
Okay, credit.
So they actually are included in their transfer. So
Well, maybe that's a point we can clarify through this study. The other questions I would hope that we could garner through this would be reach into the pipeline by these higher education institution. Do they participate on the P16 Council, and if so, how far back do they go? How far back in the pipeline do they go? Are they only at the high school level? Do they go into the middle school, elementary schools? It would be nice to know if they're doing that. Concur, not concur? No?
I'm just trying to figure out how to write that down.
Do these institutions of higher education reach back into the pipeline? I know you have programs, and the programs will sort of identify if they do, but to the extent to which they do and how far back into the pipipeline do they go?
Talking about outreach.
Would be interesting to.
Or in-reach.
Yeah, okay.
And actually, the saturation level, one of the questions I asked the financial aid people, the experts from the different universities is, you have a college night, and, at one particular high school, 1,000 kids come with their parents, and another particular high school, 5 kids come with, by themselves, and then do you check off and say, well, we talked to this high school?
Yeah, what does that mean? And it was exactly what the gentleman from U of H was talking about, where they went into the one high school, and then it ultimately ended up that they're teaching the math classes to get the kids there. And that's a big difference in if you check, yes, we're interacting with that school, from we went to a college night to we're teaching their math classes. And we don't know that.
And there again, how far back? I mean, high school seems to be the common, but how far back can we get them into the pipeline?
I'm just wondering, Brenda.
We have information related to certain institutions that ours is selected around the Go Center efforts, if you're in high schools or middle schools. So this is probably a project we need to work on together.
Makes sense.
To be sure that we cover that. I think our field specialist can help with this.
One of the field specialists in Houston is going to help on this WeGo project of the early childhood with UT Health Science Center with their Circle program with Dr. Susan Landry. And we have a meeting, I think, next week with the field specialist who's going to that's going to be her thing to help brainstorm. And they have that packet already. Packet. That's an understatement. Crate of information.
There's also, I don't know what Tom Scott asked to survey the institutions, which we're going there, because he's working on a study which was reported last week. criteria. And it's possible he may have asked within that survey, what students do they, how far do they advance? So I think I actually see him at 2 o'clock, and I'll ask him.
Okay, great. Again, if we don't have the answers this time, maybe in a future, because I think we're going to find one of the gaps is they don't go far back enough. Is there any way to quantify that these institutions are doing anything different to attract underrepresented groups? Or are they doing the same stuff? It'd be nice to say, okay, what did you try, for the last 5 years, and what are you going to do differently for the next 5 years? We can't, I know everybody knows the definition of insanity. I mean, we've got to do things differently. And so it'd be nice to ask the question and maybe make them pause and think about what can they do differently the next 5 that they've not done previous 5. I don't know if that's worthy or not.
That's a really good question.
Can I say something about that, Linda?
Brenda, why don't you just move on up here, babe? We're only going to be here just a few more minutes, but we're glad you came.
We have been looking at the requirements for the Uniform Recruitment and Retention Strategy, and we know that we have to do something other than what has been done in the past, because the reports have been written at the institutions. We posted them to the website. We really haven't done anything with them. So we have been meeting. We've had one fairly intensive meeting talking about how do we change it so that it is valuable not only to the institution, but valuable to other institutions and to the state. And one of the things we talked about is exactly what you're talking about. It covers that how far down do you go and what kind of innovative programs have you put in. So many of the STAR Award winners are programs that serve 150 students out of 5,000. And they've got a really good track record with that 150 students. But how do you take it to the next level? And how do you find
it's got to be, and I think economically sensible
to do it.
And here again, I think especially in the area of high need, emerging areas, nursing, engineering, etc. What are you going to do differently that you haven't done before? It's worthy.
And part of what they'll be interested in is are things where you should change. Look at the numbers of things where you change. Not just doing something, but can you demonstrate that those students that weren't coming previously really are now, and are they being well served once they're there?
Well, and how we can change things from pockets of excellence, or here's a program and here's a program and here's a program, and this one really like the Center for Mexican American Studies, great program, but 100 students or whatever. How can we make it a systemic change?
To my next question about the best practice, identifying the best practices, and how can they, and if they can be, replicated systemically.
The TWD program is doing best practices for engineering and computer science. Let me share one with you that they found. I believe a technology workforce development grant program that's designed to increase the number of baccalaureate degrees in engineering and computer science. This was from a border area. I believe it was UT Pan Am. I can't quite remember right now which of the institutions was reporting this, but the National Science Foundation was quite interested in it. The students with probably from the Hispanic background are expected to work, in order to help their families. And when they go into the university, even if with a scholarship, they are still encouraged by their families to go out and get a job. So what this particular program did was it put them on work study. First come, first serve. Everybody earned the same amount. Didn't matter whether they were a clerk in the departmental office where they saw the faculty on a daily basis and learned the business of the department, or whether they were in the labs conducting research. And they have been able to retain the students that way.
Is one of the criteria, I can't remember, Glenda, but it's one of the criteria for the STAR Award, not only is it replicable, but how can you replicate it? I can't remember. I read for it last year, and I don't remember if that was one of them.
We asked the institution to weigh in on how easy it would be, basically, to replicate it. And almost all of them say that you can do it as long as you have the funds to do it. I mean, that is the big issue. But we also know that many of those programs are tied, their success is tied to a particular person, somebody who sees that as their mission. And if that person leaves that institution, sometimes those programs diminish because that person has left.
Called the Mack truck theory.
It's the crusader, that is able to do it. And so it's when we're reading those Star Awards, you see very often where it is that person who is doing it. In other cases, you can see that they have enough financial support from grants or otherwise to be very innovative in what they're doing.
Actually, Jake, comes up again. When we met with presidents and chancellors in this briefings last week, you brought up the issue that many projects such as Star Award winners go from grant to grant.
Yes, they do.
Really? And that to do that, they have to change what they're doing. And so he brought up the need for some solid funding for some critical programs. And we have talked before about if there's demonstrated success, and the indication that something's scalable, those might be things that the board and institutions might decide are worthy of sort of saying, here's something where we really need some solid funding for, whether they be learning communities. I mean, there are a number of things that are out there. And I think everyone would need to decide that they were scalable and it made sense to get some target funding for it so they don't have to skip from.
Yeah, and it would be nice. It would be nice to tie these programs into some sort of accountability system for the university or the institution, so that there's just not a maverick leading a cause, but a systemic focus on making sure that happens. Tied to the TRVs, tied to the whatever.
Well, like the success of the Austin Community College and Austin ISD program, and now it's being replicated in 2 different districts in Houston and probably other places. And part of that, I think, has to do with, and it's not a criticism, it's a critique of the presentation of the Star Awards, and that is, to have some deep impact into the how-tos, how to replicate it. And what we did as a follow-up in Houston is we honored the Star Award winners in Houston, and they went through the entire program and said, here's how we do it, here's what we're doing. And if each of the communities would pull the different Star Award winners, even invite them to a particular campus or something and pull everybody in and begin to talk about school districts and community colleges and four-year universities and how they, whatever the program is. I heard about a program at a STEM conference. It's in the College of Engineering where they take young ladies in high school and they do this intensive engineering program all summer long at U of H. And I'd never heard of it. That doesn't mean anything, but I'd never heard of it. And I said, y'all ought to apply for Star Award, because those are the kinds of things that other universities would want to replicate.
That's something that has been mentioned in various forms of involved.
Yeah.
Look for some trends. I mentioned learning communities. Would probably have at least 6 or 7 different institutions be recognized for their learning communities, although they were not all the same. Some focused on engineers, for example, and some focused more broadly. And there are things to be learned. And I wouldn't be surprised if most institutions have them at some small level right now. And so the question is, do others that don't need them, and is it logical to expand? And I've heard from one institution that they actually expanded too many people. It was overwhelming, and I don't know whether that was a resource issue or whether it just didn't work as well in a larger mass.
Okay, any other additions or comments on the preliminary data points? And I'm sure that the committee, once they're convened. Right. Information, starting points. Anything else you want to add on that? So I am too. And that kind of covers the first one of our goals, of all of these goals. So I don't need to read to y'all, but the other, the next one is about distance education issues, which we would be involved with planning and accountability. And we need to put distance ed in there somewhere, because every time I read this, I go, alternative delivery systems, and I have to remind myself where that discussion began. So for those of us who are short attention span, short memory, remind me what that is, because I always have to think about that. The next is strategic plan for graduate education in the state, implementing recommendations of doctoral education with the guidance of the Graduate Education Advisory Committee. That the next one, the continual.
Is that happening?
Oh, yes, we've met.
Ongoing, isn't it?
Yes, we've met about 7 times.
Oh.
And we'll do an update. That's we kind of want to
A report.
talk about undergraduate ed this time. Maybe next time we can give a little update on graduate education. Maybe. Then the next item are, that the degree expansion, mission expansion issues that we keep the creeps. Then cost and affordability of undergraduate and graduate education. Have we begun efforts on that?
Well, we know it's going up.
We're going to. And all of this isn't, we're looking at this isn't like we want this done in 6 months. A lot of these are issues that are ongoing and will take a lot of time to accomplish. Some we had a finite that we needed that information by the legislative session. Others not. Yes, David.
This is one that I think would involve probably the majority of the efforts through planning and accountability and student services, because these are two areas that I've never worked with.
Letter E.
Letter E, they can provide that information to you, but those are the most knowledgeable.
Planning and accountability. So we need to add them.
Primarily student services.
And they're already involved with
So we need to make sure they know that the work we're going to do is most important.
And then on the research side, the item A is, more money to fund the advanced research programs, possibly convening a blue ribbon committee, showcasing state-funded research in other states in the United States, so we could perhaps interest our legislature in doing some more of that.
The jumping off point for A2 would be the report prepared by James Jarrett, where he used other programs, both federal and in other states, to benchmark the advanced technology program.
So that's
We're getting a report on that at the July 4th meeting, so that could be a point where you can see what you'd like to know next from that, what we do next.
Great. And
James Jarrett. That was part of the APT impact study. I don't know if he'll replicate that also in the ARP impact study or not.
Sorry, say that again.
It was APT.
The ATP impact study that the board heard, the Advanced Technology Program, which is the applied research program that the board had been trusteed with and was last funded by the legislative session that met in 2003. Dr. James Jarrett prepared an impact study of the impact of that program on the state. He delivered that study to the board in April of 2005, and in that study he benchmarked the Advanced Technology Program against other federally funded and state-funded research efforts, coming to the conclusion the Advanced Technology Program was successful in all of the criteria under which it was established, or more than successful. I don't know if benchmarking is also going to be included in the advanced research program impact study. We sort of changed the initiative and asked him to get with the provost presidents and research executives at the universities around the state and health-related institutions to determine what the research program of the 21st century should look like. I believe that most of the information we actually need is probably in the April 2005 report for A2.
But he's doing a report, as David said, and for the impact of the ARP, Dr. Jarrett, yes.
And Dr. Hackerman will be at the July board meeting to present the A-Corp recommendations on increasing the funding, which I believe you all heard at your last meeting. Dr. Hackerman was here, so that's just a follow-up.
That's always a treat.
Right, and because the legislative appropriations request will be, you will consider that at the July meeting, we thought we ought to bring him in to make the case that it's not, that it's this external group, that really is trying to promote the idea for additional funding, not just a staff recommendation.
Does he want to talk to her, or do you want him to talk to her?
Are we ready to move on to the last two?
Okay, secure increased external funding for higher education institutions sufficient to achieve new Closing the Gaps research targets in cooperation with other state entities. There, primarily, the coordinating board's role is working with the governor's office. One of the things that has been opened up at the request of the governor's office is a research center's inventory on our website, where the higher education institutions load their research centers and say, they give information about the center, the size of the center, the number of employees, whether or not it is open for collaboration, presumably with not only other higher education institutions, but also especially industries within the state and industries they're trying to attract to the state. I've attended a number of sessions where the governor's office has brought in external funding agencies, federal government, DARPA, Department of Defense, Special Ops, for example, and they invite in research executives and then also some principal investigators from the higher education institutions to talk about the sorts of things that the federal government is interested in funding and what the higher education institutions could do. And some of those seem to have turned out very well. Sematech is also involved with that effort. And the last one, promote development of cooperative research efforts by higher education institutions. Other than the recently completed ARP, which really didn't allow a whole lot of that because we limited the grants even where there were multiple institutions involved, $200,000 apiece, there's really been no other action that I can think of on that item.
And then we also wanted to make sure that we kind of kept it with the Governor's Emerging Technology Fund under item B, and that's
right.
Any other questions?
Yeah, I have a quick question. Would the items under research have a direct impact to the future acceptance of universities within the state of becoming top-tier universities? In other words, if we're securing increased external funding for research, it seems to me that that's one of the critical elements missing in our 2 or 3 or 4 next level, almost to the top level universities. And if we could somehow tie the economic impact of keeping those students in state to go to a top tier university instead of saying, well, I don't want to go to UT and A&M, or I can't get into UT and A&M, but gosh, I just got into Stanford, or I just got into Michigan, or something like that. Is there some sort of economic impact of of the success of this research, of the research goals, keeping our students in state, and then that economic kind of impact of that? Does that make sense?
It does. Absolutely. One of the things that I was encouraged to do, I went through chemistry at the University of Texas at Austin as an undergraduate degree. And this was, I think, somewhat broadly true at the time. I don't know whether it's true now, but individuals were encouraged to go certainly to a different institution, possibly a quite different institution for their graduate degree than their undergraduate degree. And so I ended up going out of state. That doesn't mean that that person would necessarily have to be lost entirely to other state institutions.
I think part of what you're discussing is at the undergraduate level.
Yes,
People
right.
at the undergraduate level.
And the perception of a non-tier 1 institution.
Right. And the many, many, many people that we know that we're losing to go out of state.
But, you know, there's that.
But we got a study in the mail this week about that says that's really not happening. Did I bring that with me? We did. It's about the top 10%. It's driving people out of the state. I read it
Still don't
just a
believe
couple of
it.
days ago.
That is a manipulation of data.
Well, okay, Laurie doesn't believe it, therefore it is not true. But
Thank you, Lorraine.
we received through the coordinating board a study just
It's fictitious.
saying that brain drain was the phrase that was used in the study, saying that indeed was not true.
You know, one thing that has happened, and I don't know what's really evolving, but you know, just talking with people and talking with students, it seems to me that perhaps as a result of the top 10%, that students are looking at more options than they used to look at before. So if you look at some schools, where you would think they were taking all the top 10% students that applied, they're not. In fact, fewer, at least as of a year ago, fewer top 10% students who applied were actually enrolling than had been in the beginning. So that there's something else going on in addition. And it's related to the top 10%, I think, is that at least people begin to think, what are my options? Or parents begin to think, what are my options? But
So they're not even trying
there are a
here.
number of things going on that I think that are changing the way students look at this.
But Lori, were you asking, when we secure increased external funding, do we distribute it in a way that creates more top tier 1 kids?
Yeah, and I really wasn't getting into top 10% because I could debate that all day long, and I have files this thick on it, and I have very strong feelings, as you might guess. But that wasn't what I was really referring to. What I'm talking about is if there is a link between the economic impact of students staying in state because we have more choices, like California with their 9 top-tier universities. That's my point, and not, students are going to go out of state for graduate degrees, or students are going to go out of state for whatever reason. But the point is are there top-tier choices, and how can we, by securing more research dollars for our universities, make those, whether it's, in Dallas or UT San Antonio or Tech or U of H or anywhere else, that's where we need to focus, not to the exclusion of others, but so that we can bump them up to that top-tier status.
There's also the other side of that.
Are we going to debate some more?
No, this isn't debate at all. There's also the ability of your institutions to draw students from out of state. I mean, that's part of the economic.
Along with her argument.
And if you look at some of Steve Murdoch's data, and I haven't looked at this part recently, but drawing highly educated people from other states is one of the big things to the state's economy. Right. And part of that is when you draw students even as undergraduates, as graduate students as well.
Right. But it would be nice to quantify.
And Lorraine isn't staying.
Right. Well, it would be nice to quantify whether or not we're indeed losing students, because we only have 2 top tier 1 institutions.
Exactly.
And who are capped enrollment.
Exactly.
And I think that's what you're asking
Right.
for.
We will add a research agenda item to have this discussion at the meeting of the committee, so that we can continue the discussion and the staff can look at some of the questions that have been raised here, what they're doing right in other places, what we can do to address that better here, what the real answers to those questions are. Thank you. If we don't know, we can perhaps find out. Okay? So we're going through a whole lot in our September meeting.
Good job.
We're also interested in all of these subjects. We want to know more. Okay, thank you very much. Does anybody want to add anything before we adjourn? Do I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second. Everybody moves, everybody seconds, we're out of here.
Okay.